This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, but rocking a beautiful Toronto background behind me, which I just came back from last month from a convention. But folks, here we are on November the 30th, 2025, which is Thanksgiving in the States. We had ours back in October because I don't know what's up with that here in Canada. But nonetheless, folks, I have a great guest on the show today, whom I was connected with through Splat from the Past host Tommy Kovac. And he's got three movies that's about to celebrate anniversaries next year. Uh, wow. No, not next year. Yeah, next year. Yeah, next year. 40th anniversary for three of his movies, which are Hamburger the Motion Picture, House, and Back to School. And of course, he's in other films like High School High. We're going to deep dive these films, folks. I give you John William Young. How do you do, John?
Hey Greg, how are you, man? Good to talk
Hmm.
to you.
Yeah. Yeah, you got a lot of anniversaries coming up there next year.
I didn't even know that, but yeah, it seems like it was a long time ago. I knew that.
Well, before we deep dive these films, I would like to get a little bit of your background and what got you into the business.
Okay. Well, let's see. I was going to Santa Monica College back in 1969. So I
Mhm.
was 18 in the beginning, and I kept dropping out. Lived in Venice, California, if you know Venice, as a teenager and everything. And I kept dropping out of college, and I'd re-sign up the next semester, and I'd drop out again. I think I was into partying too heavy, to be honest. But I finally settled down and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to law school. And so I majored in poli sci and I was going and I was carrying a 4.0 GPA, and a counselor had suggested to me that I fill out my schedule for the semester. And they said, why don't you take an acting class? I mean, it's a sure A or B. And like I said, I was carrying a 4.0 and I thought, I don't want to take a chance on a B, man. So she said, "No, okay, you're good. It'll be good fun, and everything. And you're pretty personable and everything. You might be good at it." I said, "Well, I said I actually took a class when I was in junior high, and I was pretty good at it. But I said I don't know." And she said, "Yeah, go. Make up your mind because you got to fill this in. You got to have an elective. So I just thought about it and I thought, well, I've always loved acting. I enjoy movies, and I grew up was a television was my babysitter, kind of thing. And so I said, oh, okay." So I did. And I remember I went in and I did a monologue from something, and the class stood up and applauded for like 3 minutes when I was done. And they'd never done that before. And I thought, wow, okay. And I knew it was going pretty good, but I really did it to enjoy for myself and everything, but it came off so well. And I looked around, there's about, I don't know, 20, 30 really good looking girls in the class. And I thought, yeah, okay, I could go for this. So I did that, and I stayed in there, and all of a sudden I started getting in some of the plays, that they were doing at the kind of became the darling of the program and everything. And slowly but surely, people started asking me to be in their short films, and then eventually, turned into a whole thing. And at some point, after about a year or so, I just decided, hey, man, I think I'd like to make this career. And I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? My goal originally was to maybe become a judge at some point, and I realized, you know what? Law school's hard. That's a lot of hard work. And I thought, I think I'd rather play a judge than be a judge. So I changed my major, became a theater major, and did that. And then when I got out, I went to Hollywood, started looking for acting classes and things like that. Found a place at first that was just terrible. They were all about, indicating, acting. It was all about acting. It wasn't about being a real human being. And I talked to the guy on the telephone, and he goes, "Dude, I love your personality, man. Tell you what, if you come down to the theater, I'm going to give you a 6 week, what do you call it? A 6 week freebie. There's a word, scholarship." And I said, "Okay, cool." And now I'm a young guy, man. So I figure, okay, let's go down, let's check this out. I go down and he's got this place, and it's set up like this beautiful bar that's in like Las Vegas. And he's got in his lobby, he's got like posters of all, I mean, literally 6 foot tall posters of like, Brando and think everybody that you can imagine, De Niro, all these people. And it was like, oh my God, man. So it was like showbiz, man. I mean, it was like, it made you feel like, oh God, I want to do this. I want to be involved. And after about 6 weeks, realized this guy's full of crap, man. He doesn't know what the hell. He would brag that I was in construction, and I decided I did one movie and I made $1,000. And I figured that's it, I'm done with acting. But then he said I decided to open an acting workshop. He goes, I don't know much about acting. And literally within 6 weeks, I realized no, he didn't know anything about acting. And so I kind of became a thorn in his side a little bit. He would give us things about, okay, we're gonna do, and he had camera, so he would put up the camera and he go, okay, we're gonna do emotions. Okay, anger, like that. People would go. I mean, they're growling and everything like that. And then somebody else would do something. Fear, woo, and all this. I thought, what? This is weird, man. And then he had this girl that came on. She was an Asian girl, and she was really a pretty good actress because I'd seen her do other work in the class. And he would say to her, he'd go, okay, anger, and her expression wouldn't change, nothing at all. But I could kind of see behind her eyes that maybe there was something inside that was going on. Then he would give her another emotion, and then he would go back to fear. And she didn't change the expression on any of those and everything, but yet I felt something and everything. And he goes like this. He goes, oh, we can't fool her. And I thought, oh my God, you've been fooling us for at least the 6 weeks I've been here and everything. So I called him out on it, man. And he had his guy that worked for him, is I can't remember his name now. Miko called me at home. He goes, listen, Ivan's kicking you out of the class, but he's going to recommend you to this guy, Grant Williams, who turned out to be the incredible shrinking man in that original movie. You like those kind of movies, right? Do you remember that one, The Incredible Shrinking Man? Yeah,
Oh
and
yeah.
so I went to study with Grant, and he was incredible. He taught the Stanislavski method, and he was a member of the actor studio and everything. And he came in, and he immediately became wanted to be my mentor, and he took me in to meet his agent, and I got his agent. He took me to the actor studio, introduced me to Tennessee Williams, helped me get into the actor studio. And then once I got into the actor studio, it was like everything else was history. So that's kind of like how it all started and everything, and kept going. And just one
Mhm.
little thing, in the beginning I started in the theater, did commercials early on and everything on. And I didn't like it because I thought it was a low budget, bad. And I had been studying Shakespeare with Diana Maddox from the National Shakespeare Company out of London. And so I was being classically trained. I was doing Chekhov, things like that. And all of a sudden, they want me to do, excuse my French, but titty flasher movie, because that's what it was. I don't know. Let's see. Oh, okay. I can push this and get rid of that. Okay, there you are. Okay, I had a box blocking you. Anyway, so we're doing this movie, and it was just awful, an awful script. And the girls were running around and taking their bras off for no reason, flashing their boobs. And I thought, well, this is kind of weird. This is not much reality. And I'd call my agent and I said, man, I don't know if I want to do this. This is terrible. And she said, Johnny, you got to start somewhere. Everybody has to start somewhere. And to get fourth billing in a movie, a feature film, do you realize what a big deal that is? Who cares if it's crap? You got to start. So I said, okay, I'll do. It was called Hollywood High. That's what it was called.
Mhm.
And I had fourth billing. And I thought, okay, it's good. And I remember Patrick Wright, the director, came to me and he said, okay, all right, listen, this next scene we're going to shoot, this is going to be a nude scene, because at the time orgies were a big deal. This is like early 70s. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't, nobody told me I was going to have to get naked for this thing. I don't know if I'm into this and everything. And I was given a hard time. And Patrick comes up to me finally. He goes, "What's wrong with you?" He puts his arm around me. He's a big guy, 6'2", 6'3". Puts his arm around me and he goes, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Patrick, I can't do this, man. I'm classically trained. I do Shakespeare. I do Chekhov. I'm in the actor's studio. I'm learning how to do Stanislavski method. I can't do this. I mean, come on. I have a grandmother. She sees me doing this and it's going to break her heart. I can't do this." And he goes, "Oh, listen, John, you sound so much like me as a young actor." And he said, "But I just want to ask you one question. Do you want to be a professional actor or not?" And he paused. And he had me, man. It was like, oh my God. Yes, yes, Patrick, I want to be. And he goes, and listen, okay, listen, no, listen to this, man. We're doing this. It's in dark. It's going to be in silhouettes. And so, the premise was that there were four guys with their four girlfriends, and they're from Hollywood High, and they're going to the beach and everything, and doing a lot of stuff like that, running around town. And he said it's going to be silhouetted. Nobody's going to know what is whose and blogs and everything like that. So I pulled up my I pulled my pants down actually. No, they gave us robes and everything, and I said, okay, I'm doing it, man, and I did it. And I still was so embarrassed and just so kind of ashamed that I did that and everything. And thank God when it did come out, that scene you could tell anybody. And I think you saw like maybe a girl's boob once or something like that. And I thought, okay, thank God. And interesting, the girl who played my girlfriend, she was a Playboy bunny, and her best friend was a girl named Playboy bunny named Patty McGuire. Well, Patty McGuire that year was the Playmate of the Year, and she married Jimmy Connors. And at that time, I had kind of started playing a lot of tennis, right? So I was really into tennis and everything. I was kind of excited, and she was gorgeous. And I thought, oh, Jimmy Connors, man, not only you winning tennis matches, you're winning at love too, man. She was hot, man. I mean, she was really good. So she would come down to the set occasionally and everything. So I got to see it. I thought, okay, it's a little bit glamorous and everything. So Hollywood High was kind of like my first movie. And then, started going on and still doing a lot of plays on the side. I started doing a little bit of stand-up comedy at the Comedy Store and the Improv and places around town. And, I did that for a while. I got into a play where I played a stand-up comic, and I was the antagonist, the bad guy in the play and everything. And I got to write my own monologues, comedy monologues, and I did three of them in the play. And we were a big hit in town. I mean, it was huge, huge, huge hit. And I remember that a couple of good things came. I got a couple of movies out of that, a TV pilot. Uh, let's see what else. I got a couple of commercials. I got an agent. I got a manager. I got a movie. God, what was it called? I can't remember now. I think it was called. It changed titles a couple of times. It was Loose Nuts or Loose Bolts or something like that. Had Martin Mull in it, and oh God, who else? Oh, what's her name? Joan Hackett, who had been nominated for an Oscar, like a couple of years before that and everything. So it's kind of a big deal and
Hmm.
everything. Peter Winograd was the director, I remember. And I remember I had somebody got a word back to me and said, Peter said that he said, man, he goes, John doesn't even know how talented he is. And, to be honest, I kind of didn't, I kind of did, but I kind of didn't too, but luckily when you're a young actor and you're fairly talented, people love to help you. So I got that kind of help along the way. And and by doing that play, for instance, um, let's see, what was the story I was going to tell? I was I was playing basketball. I used to be a jock. I was an athlete, right? And so I used to play on basketball. I played on the Mork and Mindy basketball team, and I had known Robin, a little bit. I didn't know him real well, but we did stuff at the Comedy Store a lot. I remember Sam Kennison, who I worked with in Back to School. Yeah, Sam was one of the comics, and I remember when he first came in there, the comics we would sit in the back, and we would make commentary on each guy's act and everything. And we're sitting there and we're talking to each other, and we're going, that dude's got he's got one joke, man. Ah, and then he turned purple, right? And we go, when's this guy? We started making bets. When's this guy gonna pass out, man? But the thing about Sam was he kept coming back and he kept coming back and he kept working on it and he got funnier and funnier and funnier. And man, by the time he got to doing that joke about the people dying in Africa of starvation, and he just did the whole thing about you go where the food is, for crying out loud. I think Tommy did this where he says, and I'd forgotten this line. He goes, you know what this is? It's sand. You know what it's going to be in 100 years? It's sand. It's get out of Africa, move to where the food is. I mean, I'm not kidding. I laughed so hard I cried, and I thought, oh my God, this is the same guy that used to come in there and do But he just got better and better and better, and eventually we worked together. And Back to School, I didn't have any scenes with him or anything, but I knew he was in it and everything. And he had become a star by this point, and he was doing an act, and he always wore the trench coat and the beret hat, and kind of tennis shoes. He wore sweatpants and tennis shoes. And he'd get up there, and I know he was a preacher at one time, so he kind of knew how to preach and everything, and that's what he'd do. But he had a point of view that was so sarcastic and so critical. And people just zoned in on that man. And he was a chick magnet. I mentioned this Tommy. I said, he was a chick magnet, man. I couldn't understand. This guy was kind of built like me. We were both kind of stocky and everything. And man, the girls loved him, and it was like, damn, well, way to go, man, way to go. But when I found out that he was going to be in back to school, it was like, oh, cool, and everything. And I tried to find out when he was filming, and I guess he was only filming in the classroom, so it wasn't a lot of days. And I had 2 days that I worked, and they were like different times of the month or something like that. They used to do a thing where you could work, and then they wouldn't have to pay you from that date to the next time you work. They could do that one time in a movie. So they'd say, okay, we're paying you for this day, and then we got a break. We're going to bring you back like in 2 or 3 weeks, and then we'll pay you for that day, but you don't get paid in between. Usually, what you try to do is to get jobs where you get paid from this day all the way to this day, right? There might be things in between, and maybe not things in between, but that's the kind of contract you always want to get. I didn't learn that until much later because a lot of times I would pick roles. It was like, this is a great character, man. I'd love to do this one and everything because that's what I was a character actor. And then I started meeting friends that were in movies I was in, and I go, man, you're throughout that whole movie. And he goes, yeah, I made this much money. And I got, shit, they're making 5 times the money I'm making, and they're like, you don't remember them at all. I mean, so some of the roles I did, you kind of remember, but I'm in and out so quick, I wasn't making much money. So when the Roadhouse film came along, thank God, man, I was in there for 3.5 months, and that great paycheck, man. I'll tell you, man, that was really, really, really excellent. But so I was still doing plays around town, doing a little bit of stand-up comedy, got into the actor studio, got involved in a play there, and I met Tennessee Williams. And it's funny because Grant Williams introduced me to him in Tennessee, and I didn't realize it was Tennessee Williams. I think he may have said his name, but I didn't say it. He goes, "Come over here." He goes, "Tennessee, I want you to meet John Young. Someday you're going to be writing for him like that." And he goes, "Well, John," and he grabbed my hand to shake hands. He goes, "It's a real pleasure to meet you. Oh my God, you have the most beautiful blue eyes." And then he held onto my hand for a long time, right? I'm a kid. I'm like 21, 22 years old. And so finally I pull away and we walk away. And I said to Grant, I go, "Was that guy trying to pick me up?" And he goes, "Yeah, I think so, man." Now, I got to see, got cast in a play that he was doing a rewrite of Camino Real. And it
Hmm.
was a small part. I was on the Real. And so I was selling goods. And, the way they worked at the actor studio, they didn't give a damn about the lines, right? And so, but Tennessee was from the writers unit, and I started going to the writers unit, the directors unit, and of course the acting unit. I took Shakespeare classes there. I took fencing classes. I took voice classes. So I was really getting a lot of the stuff. But anyway, Tennessee would come in and he would watch us rehearse. But the way the studio worked, they would always work on creating the life of your character, right? So I'm on the Real and I'm selling goods with a couple of other small part actors, and so we're selling our goods. So we're improvising all the time. And Tennessee would, and eventually what they would do is they would say, "Put this together, and then we got a script, and then you're going to put the dialogue to go in." But we know the life of the character, so that's how they work. Tennessee would come in, every once in a while, and he would sit there and he would take notes, right? And was one of the nicest guys. I mean, just really a sweetheart, man, but very, very professional. And I'd watch him, he'd take notes, and I'm improvising my character and everything. And he would go away, and then he'd come back a few days later and he'd give us some rewrites and everything, and we'd see what what. So he comes back this one day and he gives us rewrites, and he's used some of the lines that I was improvising in the rewrites. Man, I was so excited. I got on the telephone. I'm calling all of my friends at Santa Monica College and UCLA. I'm like, "Tennessee Williams, he took some of my lines and he's doing it in his new rewrite of Camino." I was so excited, right? And so anyway, but eventually, the play didn't go on, and eventually I realized that the actor studio, they rehearse a ton of plays, and very few ever really go into full productions. So, that was part of that thing there. When I finally got my first TV show, I was in another play at the actor studio because I guess I didn't learn my lesson. And it was right after the Charlie Manson thing had broke, right? So it was a couple of years after that, and somebody had written a play that was kind of like the Manson family thing, and I got cast as a kind of a what Charlie what Charles Watson character, who was,
Okay,
what
yeah.
was it, Charlie? Not Charlie Watson. It was Charlie Watson, yeah. And anyway, so I was kind of like the sidekick and everything, and it was a lot of fun. It was being directed by this man named Mark Daniels. I had no idea who Mark Daniels was and everything. Older man. At that time, I'm in my early 20s, and he's like 60 something. I found out later that he had been an actor and then turned to directing and everything, but had a long career himself in like the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, something like that. Anyway, he took a liking to me, and I was just trying to play, myself, basically trying to figure out what would I do if I were this character in this given set of circumstances. So I was trying to keep it that simple, right? And I was playing it, but for some reason, he kind of took a liking to me as an actor. So he would always give me, great notes and everything like that. I remember there was an actress who had been a star at one time. I can't remember her name, but she was really on the downslide. She had lost her look. She was probably in her 50s at this point. And at that time, it was a real small box for women. If you're beautiful, oh, you're going to work, man. But if you don't build a following and become a star, when you get up to that, 35 to 50 in range and everything, that's going to be the end of your career. And we kind of accepted it, knew it. Man, it was a little bit bigger. Our box was bigger, right? And I kind of felt ashamed of that, but it was the truth. Anyway, so
Hmm.
her box had gotten up here and she hadn't become a superstar, so her career was fading, but she was in the play. And a PR lady came in and she wanted to get our bios and our resumes and all that, and wanted to know what unions we belonged to and everything. And at the time, I had done something where I could have joined AFTRA. So I was going to join AFTRA, and I hadn't got into Screen Actors Guild yet, and I hadn't signed the papers yet to get in the union. And so the PR person said, "Well, what unions?" And I said, "Well, I'm eligible to draw some, but I'm not any of the unions." And this actress, this older actress, she went ballistic, and she thought, "What do we got? Amateurs here?" And she just went crazy and went to Mark. "What are you doing, Mark? You're getting amateurs in our play and everything." Mark Daniels, God bless his heart, he got up in her face, man, and he pointed his finger and he goes, "Everybody has to start somewhere. He's a talented young kid. He's in his early 20s, for crying out loud. If you say something else, you're out of the play." And this woman, boy, she looked at him like, "Oh my God." And after that, she wouldn't even look at me, man. And I thought, "Oh my God." So Mark Daniels, stood up for me. Well, so that, again, another play at the actor studio. It doesn't go on, right? But we rehearsed forever and ever and ever, right? And so it was fine. But anyway, about a year goes by, and I'd kind of moved away from the studio. I'd moved into, I don't know if I was doing Beverly Hills Playhouse by then or not, but and I was doing survival jobs and things like that. I run into a guy that was in the play, and he was the only one that was within 10 years of my age. He was probably in his early 30s, and we hugged each other, as a black gentleman and everything. We hugged each other and said, "How you doing, man?" I saying, "Yeah." And I told him, well, I finally got some work. I had the Hollywood High movie. I had a bunch of commercials I was doing. I got a couple of TV pilots that didn't sell, so I did that. And I said, "How about you?" And he goes, "Not too much, man. I can't get things going. I'm just doing the survival job." And I said, "Oh, I'm doing survival jobs too, man. So I understand like that." And we're talking, and I say, "Hey, listen, do you have Mark Daniels' phone number?" Because he started sending me to all these casting people that were his friends. Because he just said, "I want you to meet him because it's someday in your career they're going to help you down the line." So I'd go to these casting directors, and they would always say, "Well, I don't have anything for you." I could see if I had like a football player in high school. I was like 22 or 23 or whatever it was, and I looked like I was 16 or 17. So I got what they were talking about. But they said, "I don't have anything, but you must be pretty good because Mark Daniels wouldn't send it to me if you weren't good." So I thought, well, okay, well, that's a compliment. I'll take that and everything. But I never got to say thank you to Mark Daniels. So the kid gave me, the guy, he wasn't a kid, he's in his 30s. He gave me Mark's phone number, and I called. Mark wasn't there, but his wife was. And I said, "Hi, you don't know me. My name's John Young. I was from the actor studio. I was in Mark's play that he was directing and everything." And he started sending me out to some casting people and some producers that were friends of his, and I got to take some general meetings with them and everything. I said I never got a chance to thank him, so could you just let Mark know that I called just to say thanks? And she said, "Give me your phone number and I'll have him call you back." And I was kind of shy, and I was like, "It's okay, I don't want to bother, I didn't want to bother anybody, right?" I said, "It's okay." She said, "No, no, give me your number. I'll have him call you back." So that night, and this is the old days, when uh, Yeah, it was the old days where you had an answering service. You had to call the answering
Yeah.
service and everything. I'll get that's in another story. I'll tell that in a little bit. But anyway, so Mark Daniels calls me back and he goes, "Hey, so John, what are you doing right now?" And I kind of told him what I had done and everything. And I said, working the survival jobs primarily. I got to pay the rent and everything. And he goes, "How'd you like to be in a TV show?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "Well, meet me at Warner Brothers Studios on Friday evening or Friday afternoon, and we'll talk about it and everything." And he goes, and since I'm directing it, so you got an in with the director, so that's pretty good. But I want you to meet all the producers because they have to approve everything. So I said, okay. So I remember I took the bus down. Oh my God, I'd forgotten that part. I took the bus from Hollywood, the Hollywood area. I was up off of Vermont and Third Street. Off the bus there, all the way out to Warner Brothers, got off the bus, went and introduces and everything. And they're going, yeah, okay, Mark. Well, if you say he's good, then okay. Yeah, I think he could fit in. It was not a huge part, but it was, it had about, I don't know, a dozen, 15 lines or something like that. But it was throughout, and I got to work with the stars. Some of the stars are on the TV show, and we're talking and everything. I said, okay, I think it's all set. Now, I was working at UCLA at the time. I had finished, dropped out of college, and I took on a full-time job. I had worked there part-time in the registrar's office. So I took on in the scheduling office. They gave me a full-time job. Now, get a load of this, man. I made exactly $434 a month. Now, mind, this is in the early 70s. This is good money, man, for a guy, right? And so I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's cool and everything like that. And so he turns to me and he goes, "How's $2,000 a week sound?" I just about crapped my pants, man, because that was 10 months of work, at UCLA. And I said, "Oh yeah, man. Okay, 2000." So it was 2 weeks job, so 2 weeks on the show. So it was $4,000, man. It literally was, 10 months of because once they take out the taxes and everything. So I thought, "Oh man, this is working out good." And he goes, "Oh, by the way, here's our star of the show." We turn around, it's Lucille Ball. And she's doing like her special for the year. She had a yearly special like Bob Hope did. This is after I Love Lucy and after the Lucy show and Lucy or whatever it was and she was doing yearly specials like Bob Hope, and they did about 4 or 5 of them, and they were always the number one rated show by the Nielsen ratings every year. Hers and Bob Hope, they went one and two. They switched back and forth. And so that was who it was, and I did that show and everything. And uh, what's his name? Ed McMahon played her husband. I got to become friends with him, and Steve Allen was on the show, and I played Steve Allen's television directory. And the premise of the show was that Steve Allen was going to go interview Lucy's character. Lucy Whitaker was her name, because President Jimmy Carter, it shows you how far back we go. President Jimmy Carter was going to be coming to town, and so she was going to be interviewed by him because I can't remember what the premise was again, but she somehow they knew her and was going to come to town, so it was a big deal. And so Steve Allen's show, which I guess was a local show in Illinois, Chicago probably. So and it was Steve Allen's show, right, and everything. So he was basically paying himself, and I'm his director and everything. So anyway, so I got to go and set up and get stuff going and everything. And Lucy's she's kind of a scatterbrained and everything, and I can see that's going on and everything. Steve Allen comes, and I got to get Lucy to come out, trying to get her to come out and everything. And finally, she opens the door, comes out, and she's playing crazy, wacky, and everything. And so we had this scene together. Steve was a really interesting guy, and he was tall. Ed McMahon and he both were like about 6'4", 6'5", right? Tall guys, really tall guys. So, I'm like 5'8", so I felt like a midget next to these guys. But Lucy, of course, she was much smaller and everything. But Vivian Vance was in it also, and Gail Gordon, which all of her core cohorts that had worked with her for over the years. And it became really, really nice. The show went really well, and Lucy became my mentor for about a year and a half after it was over. She gave me a bouquet of flowers after the show was over, and told me I reminded her of her son Desi, and and she said, no, you should have your own show. She had just become director of development at ABC Television. So she said, "So I'm looking for talent. I see your talent. I'm going to help you get a TV show." Now it never happened, but I got a chance to go to her house a couple of times. I went to visit her at ABC. I think it was Olympic or Pico. I can't remember. It was real close to, of course, it never came. But again, at the same time, Lucy show starring starring role Tony Judge, and I got cast as his daughter's blind date, and my Beverly Garland was so she introduced me to Tony Randall's daughter as their blind date, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with me. So I got to play this really goofy character, and it was so much fun, man. I just had a blast. Tony Randall started treating me like I knew it was pretty funny in the show. In fact, Tommy found it, and he gave me it was a link. It was on YouTube for a while. I had seen it 30 some odd years. And I said, "Well, how do I get?" And Tommy sent me the link, and so I was able to go on, and I clicked it and everything. And I thought, "Oh, my kids have got to see this because I don't think they had seen it, right?" So I waited a couple of days, and I went back on, and it was gone. And I was like, "Oh man, it's gone." And I found out evidently you have to have the rights or something like that to do it. And I've been looking for it and everything. And unfortunately, somebody said, "Well, you should have downloaded." I didn't know. I don't know how to do that stuff. It's like okay. But anyway, it's kind of sad, but I enjoyed that show, and Penny Peiser was on it, who I guess Tommy is friends with also, and
I've
she had
interviewed
worked. And
her.
funny, she and I are Facebook friends. I don't even remember how that came. Yeah, you've met her?
I've interviewed her
Yeah.
twice.
Anyway, but yeah, so you have, okay.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
was in All
she
the
she was a
President's
sweetheart, very
Men.
pretty girl.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, oh, lots of stuff. Oh, lots of stuff. Oh, I almost got her mixed up with Cindy Williams. Somebody was asking me about who was at the Actors Studio, and I said, I was the kid, man. I was the young kid there. Everybody else, Barbara Streisand was there. In fact, I got to see Barbara Streisand and Sally Kirkland, who just died 2 weeks ago. They did Romeo and Juliet together. And, I was one of about 40, 50 people that were in the theater, to watch her do the work in front of Strasbourg. So, I remember sitting between Robert Duvall and Harvey Keitel a lot,
Oh
and I remember
wow.
Sidney Pollack was sitting in front of me, and Martin Ritt was there, and Arthur Penn and Mark Rydell, all the directors and everything. Bruce Dern, Shelley Winters were there all the time. Lee Grant, a lot of it's your younger audience is gonna who the hell are those people? Because
Oh, I know who
I'm
they
in my
are.
mid 70s, man. So if they were alive, I mean, Diane Ladd, Bruce Dern's wife, and Laura Dern's mom was in there. She just passed away too about 4 weeks ago. So and they were Sally and her were friends, and so it's like, oh my God, man, I'm getting up there in years. All of my people that I knew way back when are all passing away, and I'm getting close too. In fact, if I make it to 75 in March, I'll have outlived my mom and my dad both. They died at 74. So keep your fingers crossed for me if you would, Greg. I appreciate
Yes,
it, man.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had Jeffrey Mark on here on numerous times, and he do tributes to we where we deep dive on people in the profession that he knew, and we did one on Lucille Ball, and we did one on Steve Allen.
Oh,
He's
no
got
kidding.
Oh
Wow.
yeah, because he knew them, especially Steve Allen, and
Yeah.
deep dived on them. And Jeffrey always gave some great insight into these people because he knew them personally. So I mean
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was a major catch. But no, it's interesting, because I know all these names because I was born in 1972, so I grew up with
Oh, okay.
with all this. But how interesting is it that we talked about anniversaries of your 3 other films, but how about it? Just dawned on me, Hollywood High turns 50 next year.
Oh my God. Wow. Well, I feel so old now, man. Oh my God. So I was okay. I thought it was about 23 or 24, but
I'll turn 54 next year.
well, maybe yeah, wow. Okay. That's amazing, man. I'm not doing any nude scenes anymore, by the way. So tell that
Well,
director. Anyway, Patrick Wright, yeah, was his name. He played the cop. If you ever saw the movie, he played the cop in the movie. He's done a lot of movies as acting. In fact, his wife was in the movie too, and she was the wardrobe lady. So I guess she was probably
wow.
double dipping in the money, which is smart if you think about it, I guess. Yeah,
There
but
you
yeah,
go.
God, 50 years, right? So I got three 40s and a 50, and I think Roadhouse just turned 35, I think. 35?
You know, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm well aware of Roadhouse, you
Hmm.
know, Patrick Swayze and whatnot. I've never
Yeah.
seen Roadhouse.
Oh
I
my God.
I guess it's a film that and again, this is not sh I like a lot of horror films and comedies, so I guess
Yeah.
Roadhouse was never something that crossed my zeitgeist. But one
Right, right.
thing I do want to ask you about it
Uh-huh.
is working with Terry Funk. Yeah,
Terry was my buddy, man. Yeah. Yeah, he was a character. Oh, he's call me John Young, John Young, Johnny Young. Come here, Johnny Young. Yeah,
I
but he was
got
funny,
some action
man.
figures of him here.
You do, okay.
Yeah,
I think we talked about this briefly before. So did you know his brother and his dad were also wrestlers? Dory, I
yeah.
think it was Dory
Oh yeah,
Jr., Dory Sr.
yep. I love watching Terry and Dory Funk Jr. wrestle in Japan, you know.
Yeah,
Dory Funk Jr. also trained a lot of people. He's 84 now. And
he's
apparently
still
from what
alive. Wow.
yep, apparently from what I'm hearing, still steps in the ring occasionally. So, you know, shows what
Well,
kind
I
of
can
shape
believe it.
he's in. But Terry is now passed. He was 79 when he passed. But one of the
Yeah,
things
I
I
remember when he
admire,
passed.
yeah, one of the things I admire about Terry Funk is that he was a wrestler that could pretty much blend any style. He could do a technical
Ah,
match. Yeah, he could do a technical wrestling match against a guy like Bret Hart, or
okay.
he could get in there and he could brawl. He'd go in there and mix it up with uh, in the same style as, say, Roddy Piper. You know, he could go in there and he could do that,
Right.
or he could do the hardcore stuff and like the stuff in
Uh-huh.
Japan where he's tangled up in barbed wire and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I watched Terry in a match with Sabu, who we lost last year, and he and Sabu, they had especially like Terry was being, they had to bring these big clippers out to cut him free of the barbed wire. You know, they have barbed wire all around the ropes and stuff, and Terry was all tangled up, and he'd do matches in Japan where there's things detonating and exploding on the ring, and there'd be fire and this and that. And it's like,
Well, I got to tell you something. Terry Funk is one of the funniest human beings you'd ever meet in your life. When we're doing Roadhouse, we filmed on location, and we were up in Fresno at this location, right? We're
mhm.
filming up there, and we were staying in a hotel, and maybe the only one that was in Fresno at the time. I don't remember, but anyway, so we're staying in this hotel, and all of a sudden, this rumor started going around that, did you hear about what Terry Funk did? Somebody said, "What? What did he do?" He said he ran through the lobby of the hotel completely naked, screaming Joel Silver, who was the producer of the movie, "Joel Silver, Joel Silver, I need more money, I need more money." And we're like freaked out, going, Terry got naked? Now, Terry never didn't have an ounce of fat on him, man. I mean, this guy was probably one of the most buff guys that I've ever known in my life. And I used to go to Muscle Beach, man, but he was buff, man. And he was cut, man, and really cut, right? And he was
Mhm.
probably, I don't know, 50? No, not quite 50. Let's see, 79. So he was probably late 40s, I'm thinking at the time, right? But I mean, he was, I mean, just prime and everything like that. So we're all trying to figure out what the hell, where'd this come from? Where'd you hear that story? Oh, I heard it from so and so, I heard it from so and so. And eventually we realized it was just a rumor. And then get a load of this. We finally figured out it was Terry who started the damn rumor. I mean, that was Terry's sense of humor. He just knew, man. He knew he's pulling the rug over everybody's eyes and everything. But he would do stuff like that. You never knew what he was going to do, and he'd always have this little kind of smile. And I think he had a tooth that was either gold or silver over here, kind of on the side. And he smiled. I remember one time he did that, and I remember how the lights were. I saw the light kind of like sparkle on it. It flew off, and it was like, oh my God, Terry's grinning again. And all of those fight scenes that we would get into and everything, Terry could hold his own. He told me that he says, Johnny, I got to tell you, professional wrestlers are some of the best athletes in the world. And I'm going, oh, come on, man. It's all phony. It's fake stuff. He goes, it doesn't matter. They got to be good, man. And they got to be really, really athletic. And he says, the guys that are not athletic, they create characters and they create a storyline. So they don't have to use their athleticism because, if they're not good athletes. But the rest of them are incredible. He said, in fact, a lot of times the guys will get hired just based on their athleticism. And then they try to teach them how to create a character, something like that. Some guys will walk in the door and they go, oh, what a character, You think about was the Undertaker? Was that kind of a guy that
Yeah.
didn't? I mean, he didn't seem like he was very athletic, right? But he created this incredible character, and of course, what was the real big guy, the Andre the Giant?
Hmm.
But he said, no, he's a great athlete. I go, really? I mean, his head looks, the size of a bowling ball practically. And he goes, no, he's a great actor, John. He goes, it's just that, he's got his limitations because of his size and everything like that. He had told me a story. Maybe you told me the story, now that I think about it, that somebody had picked up Andre the Giant who he didn't have
Oh
permission or
yeah,
something like that.
Harley Race.
Ah, you told me that. Okay. Because
Yeah.
I think Terry had told me some stories about Hulk Hogan was one of the few guys that picked Andre up. But Andre, I guess they paid him a lot of money for that to turn over the title to Andre, I mean to Hulk Hogan. But yeah, anyway, Hulk Hogan, I got a great Hulk Hogan story. I had three boys that my wife and I used to coach, all their teams at Northridge Little League. And anyway, there was my kids my two boys were little. They were like maybe 3, 4, something like that. And they used to love to get in my garage and get my tools out. Well, evidently they took the cool tools out and were working on the side of the house. And one of them comes running in the house and says, Mom, this thing out here is spitting at us like that. And she said, what? She goes outside and somehow they'd taken my tools and they had undone the gas meter. So it's spitting gas out. So she had to call the fire department. The fire department came and everything. And so anyway, one of the kids was crying, the other one was giggling and laughing and everything like that. But the fireman took them and let them get up on the truck and all this kind of, it was a big deal, right? But I was thinking, oh my God, I got home and I heard about all this and I'm going, oh my God, guys. And I take them aside and goes, look, you can play with daddy's tools. I want you guys to get familiar with tools. So, but
Hmm.
everything, but don't do stuff like that. That could be dangerous. And so and I'm talking to another co-coach that's from the Little League. And he goes, oh, dude, he goes, I got one better than that. I go, what? And he goes, my next door neighbor is Hulk Hogan. I said, what? He goes, yeah, Hulk Hogan is my next door neighbor. He's kind of new to the neighborhood and everything, but he's my next door neighbor. And he said, Hulk was putting up like a brick fence around their yard, between their house. They had big houses with big yards and everything, big property. And I said, okay. And he says, what? He said he had guys that were working, putting up the bricks and they laid all the cement stuff down and everything, and were just placing them on top. They had to dry overnight. And he goes, my kids and his boys were like 8, 9 or something like that. They went out and they took every one of those blocks down and put them up in a stack in the front yard. And so Hulk Hogan gets home, and he's like, "What the hell happened here?" And of course, he said, "My God, man!" He goes, and he says, and I was so apologetic. He said, "Man, I wanted to beat the crap out of my kids." He said, "But I don't do that and everything. But man, I pissed, and I just was so embarrassed and ashamed. Here I got a celebrity moving in next to me. First thing that happens is my kids jack up his stuff and everything, and that stuff is expensive." And he said, "You know what?" Hulk Hogan said, "Don't worry about it, man." And Hulk Hogan paid those workers to come out and redo the whole thing. So I'm sure that cost him thousands of dollars to do and everything like that. But he said, so your kids are bad. Take a look at my kids, and everything. It's funny. But anyway,
Wow.
yeah. But
That
Hulk
is so
Hogan, he said he
cool.
was so gracious, man. And I thought, okay, yeah,
And we
good.
lost him this year
I'm,
too.
yeah, that's true, man. Yeah, I'm telling you, they're all going down, Greg. I'm right behind them. I'm on their coattails, man. So yeah, it kind of
Oh,
worries me a little bit, but
you've outlived
whatever's
him.
going to be.
You've outlived Hogan.
Yeah, so
Yep.
far, yeah. Well, how
He's
old was he? He was 70
70,
something.
71.
71. Wow.
Mhm.
So yeah, actually, so I was older than him. Yeah.
Yep.
I've had a couple of friends that have died recently. They were, like a year or two younger than me. In fact, one good buddy who was a psychiatrist, he was like a month and a half younger than me, and he died. And we always thought, because I had, I've had three brain surgeries, I've lost a kidney, I've had cancer surgery, I've had all of this stuff, four heart surgeries, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm like a cockroach. I just survive, I keep going. But we always thought that I would die way before my friend Steve did, and when he died, it was a shock. It just, this was literally like 3 months, about 3 months ago, and then Diane Ladd died. Who was Diane Ladd had told me when Laura Dern I'd met, I was at the actor studio, and when you're doing survival jobs to make it and everything, there was a guy named Harry Cohn who was at the actor's studio, and he used to brag that because of him that he got Robert De Niro into the actor's studio, right? And Harry was in his mid 30s, and maybe late 30s even. He had a big bushy black beard. I mean, he looked like Rasputin, and scared the crap out of people when they look at him. But he was a nice guy, just very quiet and kind of looks intense, big bushy eyebrows, big bushy beard, black as all get out and everything. But anyway, so he approached me one time and he goes, "Hey, you got a car, man?" He goes, "I'm a New Yorker. I don't drive cars." And I said, "Well, that's nice, man. That's nice, Harry." And he goes, "Listen, a lot of the stars here, they do moves and things like that, and they got relatives and moves." He goes, "If you take your car and we'll go rent a trailer," and he goes, "I'll pay for the rental of the trailer, and then let's go move these guys, these different people from the stars and everything. We'll make some extra cash, and it's all cash, no taxes." And I said, "Okay, all right, let's do it." So, right. So we started doing that business. And I remember we moved Shelley Winters, and then we moved her sister twice. I remember we moved her to Blanche, was her sister's name, and Shelley Winters. And then Diane Ladd approached us and said, "I'm moving from Hollywood to Studio City out in the valley. And would you guys do it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." Now I'm still pretty young, right at the time. And so we move and go out and everything. And at some point, we're moving, stuff into the house and everything. And Bruce Dern was one of my mentors at the studio, and then Diane kind of was too. And Diane comes up to me. She goes, "Laura's got a crush on you." Now I'm still a young, fairly good-looking guy at the time, So I thought, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, pay attention." And I started watching her, and Laura would want to, can I make you a sandwich? What kind of cheese do you like? We've got Swiss, we've got cheddar." She'd go down the list and everything. "What kind of soda do you want me to get, ginger ale?" Now, Harry, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, when's she going to go over? She never went over to Harry. And I thought, okay, she does have a crush on me and everything. But of course, Harry would scare the hell out of anybody, man, because he literally did look like Rasputin with that big bushy eye. And he always had like a scowl on his face, and everything. So years later, I'm at a screening, like this was maybe 10 years, maybe 10, 12 years ago. I was at a screening of one of Laura's films, and it was at Screen Actors Guild, because we did a lot of our own screenings. And it was a Q&A afterwards, and I was sitting in the front row and everything, and I thought, wow, how sweet. And I'd followed her career over the years, to see how all of a sudden, she was doing movies. In fact, I think, God, what did she do? A friend of mine, Daleen Young, who was a screenwriter, who also passed away this last year. Uh, she Little Darlings, I think, was her movie, and I think Laura might was in that, was like a little girl, 12 years old, 13 years old, or something like that. But anyway, I'd watch her career. I remember when I saw her in Mask, I was like, "Oh my God, she was so good." Mask with Cher, and Sam Elliott was in it, who is another guy that I got to work with, who was an incredible, great human being. But I would watch Laura Dern's career, and every time something good happened, man, I remember just going, "Yeah, yeah," like that. But I
She
saw
she
her at
did
this,
she did a lot of stuff with David Lynch, and of course she was in
yeah.
Jurassic Park. Yeah.
What was the one? Something in Blue. Was that David Lynch? Something in Blue.
Blue Velvet.
Blue Velvet. Yeah, that's what she was in. Blue Velvet, right? Yeah. Okay.
I don't remember all the. I think so, but I know she's
Okay.
in Inland Empire, which was the last
Ah.
movie that Lynch did. So
Well, she's had an incredible career. Her career has surpassed her mom and her dad's, which is pretty amazing, because all three of them, and I mean, I wish I had half the career each one of them had, man. I mean, I would have been very happy with that. But they were, not only were they good artists, good actors, but they were good people. And that made a big difference for me when I ran into to Laura at the screening and everything, and they showed a film she was in with Mark Ruffalo. I can't remember what it was, but a really good film and everything. And after it was over, it did a Q&A afterwards and everything. And I'm sitting there close, and I thought, I'm going to go up and talk to her. So there was a line. So I had to get in line, right? And I was like maybe third or fourth in line. And there was like 15 people behind me, at least 20 or more. And so anyway, going on. So I get up there and I remind her who I. Now, I didn't tell her that she had a crush on me, but I said I moved you guys from Hollywood to Studio City, and she even remembered the house and the house as both of them, and everything like that. And I said, yeah, and I was at the actor's studio, and your mom and your dad. I said, I just found a birthday card recently that my son was 1 year old, so that was like 1982. So we had known each other for at least 10 years. That had Diane and Laura Dern's autograph on it, to say happy birthday, Ryan. I think they were at the birthday. He turned one. I had a friend that had a clown TV show on Saturday mornings. I think it was called Mr. Moon or something like that. He came and he was like the clown for my kid's birthday party, 1 year old birthday party, but we're good buddies. And I think that they were there, but they had to leave early. I don't remember what it was and everything. And Gabe Dell, I don't know if you know who Gabe Dell was. Gabe was there too, and I think he gave me a $10 bill, which 1982, $10 is like 100 today, practically. But yeah, so it was a nice gesture also. But oh, so I told Laura who I was and everything, and I said I helped you guys move and everything, and your mom and dad have been kind of like mentors of mine for many, many years, at least in my early years of my career and everything like that. And she gave me a big hug and everything. And we chatted a little bit longer and everything. And when we finished, I said, well, listen, please say hello to my two dear mentors from so long ago, your mom and your dad. That's the way I said it, to let her know. And she looked at me and she started crying and she hugged me and literally cried in my arms, for like a minute, and finally I spoke. I said, Laura, there's other people behind me and everything like that. But she was so sweet and it moved me so much, that she was so sensitive. That's how, as an actress, she used that in her work. And that's so important for really good actors. That's what great actors do. They take what's going on inside and they put it into the work. And I saw her mom and her dad do that. Her dad was fiery as all hell, man. He was amazing. And I ran into her dad probably 5 or 6 years ago. Well, it was before I had my brain surgery, so 6 or 7 years ago. And I kind of told him the whole thing, but I told him that Laura had a crush on me. He just kept going, "Oh, Laura had a crush," and he remembered the house too. In fact, he told me Allett. It was Allett, and I had forgotten. And it was on Allett Avenue in Studio City. I was like, "Oh my God." But anyway, so I got a chance to talk to him and everything. He was promoting. Remember the movie where he was driving a tractor? He was driving, maybe you don't remember it. Anyway, I think he either won or was nominated for an Oscar for the movie, and I think it was his first. It was his first nomination, and Laura and Diane had both been nominated 3 times, I think, and I think Laura won one or two. But anyway, yes. Anyway, I'm primarily a screenwriter today, so I had written a screenplay that I thought they'd be perfect for the three of them and everything. And I had a screenplay, and I asked Bruce Dern at the time. I said, Bruce, I mean, we go back all these years and everything. Listen, I wrote a screenplay. I think it'd be perfect for the three. I didn't have a copy with me and everything like that. And this was before I was doing computers very much. And I said, okay, well, give me. And he says, okay, let me give you a phone number, and so call me and everything, and then we'll get together and figure out how to get a copy of it and everything. So I swear, 2 or 3 days later, I'm looking all over for the piece of paper with his number on it, and I can't find it, man. It's like, what the hell? And then finally, I started thinking about, well, wait, let's see. And so I tried to remember the number, and I called that number over and over. Nobody ever called me back, so kind of bummed me out and everything. And one of the producers that I had sold an option on the screenplay. One of the producers, I told him that story, and she said that she had been trying to get all three of them also to get them on page, but she was not getting. And I said, that show. Oh, you know what? The Bruce Dern thing. I think I did find it, and I called, and I think I left a message on a machine or something like that, and nobody ever got back to me. But I know what happens a lot of times. Big stars like that, they usually have assistants who are like gatekeepers, and if the gatekeeper, whoever it was, if they didn't want to give the message. In fact, Patrick Swayze told me that one time, Johnny, I didn't get your message, man. I get 300 a day. He goes, unless, somebody says it's an emergency or it's family, I don't even get the message. So I know that gatekeepers kind of don't pass on things like that. So my same thing happened with my with producer on the film. said she'd been trying, nobody got to her. And I know that Hollywood, that's what the gatekeepers, the readers, the guys who are script analysts, they usually read it and then they do a breakdown and send it. But if it's one that's kind of unsolicited, because that would be kind of unsolicited, even though I said, Bruce wanted it and everything, they might have said, oh, bullshit, got a phone number from somebody. And anyways, but if they didn't get back to me, they didn't get back to the producer either. And I think that she probably wasn't a big enough name producer. So, but that's the way Hollywood goes. There's all these Hollywood stories where people get that close, to getting a thing that's going to break the career through, and it just doesn't. Sometimes, yeah. But anyway, yeah. I'm sorry I got off on a tangent.
Oh no, no, people want to hear you, not me. I want to hear the story. So you
Yeah.
you 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 go, you know. I was gonna ask, any stories about working with Patrick Swayze?
Oh, well, Patrick and his wife and I, we had studied acting together at the Beverly Hills Playhouse. So I had known them for 2 or 3 years, and I had gotten the part. The auditions were at 20th Century Fox. And when I first went in, now you probably don't know the movie, so there were a bunch of bouncers who worked with Patrick Swayze to clean up the bar. That was the premise, right?
Mhm.
And so there was a guy called Jack the Bear. So they wanted a guy that was built like me, big husky guy, but they wanted him like 6'4", 6'5", which I wasn't. I'm only 5'8". But Travis McKenna is, and I had worked in a movie called Hamburger with Travis McKenna. So he's a big guy, big 6'4", 6'5" guy, big heavy set guy and everything. So he was perfect for that role. But the director, Rowdy Harrington, liked me. So he said, well, listen, and I had read the script ahead of time. My career was getting to the point where I was getting to read scripts ahead of time, because that's trust me, that's a big step, man. Because a lot of times they'll say, look, we want to look at you for a role, but come in and get the sides early and you can read it. So you go in early and you only see the side. You have no idea what the context of it is with the rest of the movie. You're just reading the sides in front of you. So that's kind of crappy. I hate that kind of stuff. But when you get the script ahead of time, you read the whole thing so you can see what the big picture is. So
Hmm.
I had read the whole script, right? And I knew ahead of time. And how Rowdy said, would you be willing to read for this character Tinker that's in the movie? And I'd read the script, and Tinker he was nothing physically like me. He was a little bitty, scrawny guy. He was always tinkering with things, right? So I knew, kind of what they were trying to do with that character. And I thought, I don't want to do that, man. So I said, well, Rowdy, I'll tell you what, man. If you'll let me put my own spin to the character, I'll do it. And he said, okay. He says, do you need any time? I said, yeah, let me have maybe 20 minutes out in the garden, and I'll kind of look at it and everything, and I'll come back in and I'll do it. So I went out and I started thinking about how do I want to do this character? And I thought, okay. Now I was about 340 pounds at the time with a big old belly and everything like that. And so I thought, okay, well, how would I do this and everything? So I thought about it. And I thought, you know what? And I remembered the script, and I went over it and looked at it again and again. I thought, I know what he is. He's a wannabe tough guy. He's really not a tough guy, but he's a wannabe tough guy. And so I was one of the guys that was fighting against the bouncers, and I belonged to Ben Gazzara's crew, right? He had like a crew of like 5, 6 guys that were his main guys, and I was one of his main guys. Well, evidently, we did a backstory hunt, and we figured out, really, in reality, I was the illegitimate son of Brad Wesley, who was God, what's his actor's name? Ben Gazzara's character. But he was ashamed of me because I was a big fat guy and everything like that. But so we had a story. We had a couple of my scenes that were cut out of the movie, which I was kind of upset about and everything, because you got to see what the background of Tinker was, my character. But eventually, I realized that, you know what? When you're a supporting character, you're not the most important thing in the movie, because the protagonist and the antagonist, their storyline has to go forward and everything. And funny, Patrick Swayze had called, and Buddy and I knew each other, but his nickname's Buddy, and I always knew him as Buddy. He had called me during filming one scene, and he saw the dailies, and he goes, Johnny, man, he goes, dude, I got to tell you, man, you were fucking hysterical, man, in that movie, man. You're making our movie so much better, man, bro. I'm so happy you're with us and everything. And when I had gotten the part, or when I did Tinker and everything, they called me and they said, "You got the part. You're going to play Tinker." And I was like, "Oh, cool, okay." But they want you back at 20th Century Fox. They want you to meet all the producers and everything, the money people and everything, and everything is set. They got the final yes or no. So you just got to go meet them. But I was told you have the part. Rowdy said, Johnny's got the part, man. He's playing Tinker. Okay. So I go back, and I'm in the garden at 20th Century Fox again, and I see Patrick Swayze. and he's walking his dogs, and he's, hey, Johnny, what are you doing here, man? I go, oh, I just got a part in this movie, man, and they just want me to come in and meet the producers and everything, make sure everything's okay. And he goes, what's the movie? And I said, Roadhouse. He goes, dude, that's my movie. And I'm like, what? He goes, it's my movie, man. He goes, I'm the star of the movie. He goes, listen, I'll put in some good words. And I said, well, Patrick, I was told I already had the part, man. And so you don't have to say anything if you don't want to. He goes, no, 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 don't worry, man. We're gonna do this. So when we go in and there's about a dozen people, sitting around and everything. And Patrick started, God bless Patrick's heart, man. He just starts going, he's a great actor, man. John is a great actor, man. I'm going to tell you, man, whatever he's doing is going to make our movie that much better. And I'm thinking, oh my God, Patrick, you're overselling me, man. After Patrick leaves, they might go, fuck that guy. We don't want him in this movie. He's too fat or whatever. But, I did get the movie. Eventually, Joe Silver looked at me and he just said, and Patrick's going on, Patrick and Joe Silver, and if you know Joe Silver's personality, he
Yep.
says, okay, 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 all right, oh, okay, we're gonna, yeah, sure, we're gonna, yeah, he's gonna be it, like that, and everything. So I think I had the movie, but who knows? Maybe Patrick, was the pendulum. I know his best friend Michael Weiss, who I also was good friends with, and with Patrick's wife, Lisa. We were all in the same class together with Bart Simpson and Helen Hunt was in our class. A lot of other people. Ken Norton, the professional boxer. Remember Ken Norton beat Muhammad Ali? He was in the class. We became really good friends. In fact, he took me one time. He had a Clenay. You know what a Clenay car is? It's one of those. It looks like a 1930s. It's got a real long front end. It's got those big white sidewall tires, convertible. Up and down everything. But a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful car. I mean, someone sees it and they think, "Oh my God, that must be a $500,000 car." So Kenny says to me one time, he goes, "Hey man, you want to go for a ride and through Beverly Hills in my Clenay?" I'm like, "Yeah, cool, man." So we're riding around and everything. He goes, "Listen, I'm gonna go over to a buddy of mine's house. They're having a barbecue and everything, and I can't stay, but I just want to stop by a few minutes. So come on with me, and we'll go in." So we go in. It's Muhammad Ali's house. I'm like, "What the hell?" And like, a couple of years ago, year and a half ago, I was at Shane Black's house. Shane Black is the writer director, right? And he has a house that has got, I don't know, 10, 15, 20,000 square feet of house. He's got a guest house out in the back that was bigger than the biggest house I ever owned, 3, 4 bedroom houses. It was just huge. And it was right around the corner from Muhammad Ali's house. Now, of course, Muhammad Ali had been dead for quite a while at this point, but still, just to be traveling in those circles, man. And I remember thinking, God, these guys have more money than God, man. Just amazing, and everything. And I thought, well, maybe if I had worked harder in my career, maybe I would have had that too. But once my kids were born, man, I realized my focus became about being a dad. I coached 30 of their teams when they were growing up, and that was kind of important and everything. And anyway, because Patrick had called me, man, I thought, okay, well, he's calling me at home. So, one day I wanted to call him about something. And so I called him, left a message. And then the next day, he never called me back. And the next day, and I didn't purposely have an attitude or anything like that. But at one point, Patrick comes over to me and he says, John, he goes, what's wrong with you, man? Are you mad at me for some reason? I go, well, fuck yeah, man. You didn't call me back last night. And I knew he knew my number because he had called me before, but I left it again. And I thought, well, shit, man. And he goes, and that's when he told me, he goes, John, dude, you don't understand, man. The public won't leave me alone. He goes, when I get 300, at least minimum 300 calls a day. And he had a secretary who was his assistant. I can't remember her name now. But he said, she screens all the calls. And if it's not family or if it's not urgent about business or something like that, he goes, I don't even get the call. I don't even get the message. So, if you call me next time, just say it's urgent that I talk to Buddy, to Patrick. And he goes, and then they'll put it through. And he says, use Buddy because they know you're a friend then. And I said, okay. So anyway, uh, you know, s- kind of cleaned it up and everything. And, and I knew from Michael Weiss, who was his best friend, who was in Roadhouse also. He's the guy, well, you don't know the movie, so I was going to, anyway, but Michael would be in a lot of his movies. So I knew Patrick had clout because he could say, no, no, I want Michael to do this part, and everything. But Michael Weiss took me out to his place out in Hidden Hills or Lost Hills. I can't remember what it's called now, but it was out by Tahunga. He had a ranch. In fact, he had a weird name for it. He called it Rancho Bizarro, which I thought was kind of funny. And Patrick he was trying to he was trying to breed horses, and he wanted to breed a Tennessee Walker, which is a big, strong, stout horse. You ever seen those that prance? Those horses that prance, that's a Tennessee Walker, right? Well, they're a big, sturdy horse. Well, they're not a pretty, they don't have a pretty face, that kind of a square looking face, but he had Arabians, and Arabians are beautiful horses, right? So he was trying to breed a Tennessee Walker with an Arabian. He was doing this for quite a while, and he had no luck. And then eventually he came in one day and he goes, "You're not going to believe it. We had a foal. And guess what? It's got the beautiful face of the Arabian. And it looks like it'd be buff and strong like the Tennessee Walker." So I knew that that really made him happy. And so, that's anyway. But Michael Weiss and I, sometimes he would call me up because I had a little, I had like about an acre, and I had like a cornfield and vegetable garden and a big circle driveway and everything. It was a nice place and everything. And Michael Weiss would call me up and he goes, "Hey, listen, I'm going out to Buddy's house, man, and we're going to have to go to the feed store for him because the public won't leave him alone, so we got to get some stuff for his animals and stuff." And I said, "Okay, sure." And my house was on the way to his house out there, so Michael stopped, picked me up, and we went out there. We go to the feed store and everything, and everybody in the feed store knew Michael because he had been doing that. And then when we got back to the house, Buddy told me, he says, "Johnny, I can't even go into a market now, man. People are crazy." He goes, "This fan thing, man, is nuts." And I said, "Well, okay." It's funny, we were talking about wrestling. A guy got a hold of me a couple of years ago, and he was doing midget wrestling. And he was up in like Elko, Nevada. I think I told you the story. And
Mhm.
he called me up and he goes, "Listen, I understand that the owner of this place, and they did a big events, and they would have the midget wrestling in his big, it was a big bar and everything. He would have that there and everything. But this midget wrestling, it traveled all over the world doing the midget wrestling thing and everything." And he said, "Listen, I'm going to be fairly close to your area. I'm going to be at this venue." And I knew the venue. I'd gone there to see a lot of rock and roll bands and stuff like that. It's a great place. It was out like in Agoura Hills, close to me, not too far from me, 15 minutes or so. And he said, "Would you come and, would you be my guest of honor?" He goes, "I'll get you ringside seats and everything, and I'll introduce you, and we'll feed you dinner, and nice dinner and everything there, and then just stay and enjoy the show." And I said, "Well, do you get many people coming?" He goes, "Dude, we're sold out. We got standing room only." And I'm like, "For a midget wrestling show?" And he says, "Oh, hell yeah, dude." He says, "Where we go, man, people fight to get in to see our stuff." And I'm like, "Really?" I had no idea, right? And as a kid, I used to watch wrestling. I knew Freddie Blassie, the Destroyer, Haystacks Calhoun, Mr. Moto. I mean, I knew all these guys, but when I was a kid, so it was, it was 20 years before your generation came along. But
Oh,
anyway,
I've
so
got a
so I
Freddie
loved it
Blassie
back then,
figure
but I
here
really hadn't
too.
gotten into it.
I've got a Freddie Blassie
Yeah, he called
figure here
everybody
too.
pencil neck.
Yep, I'm
Oh, you
familiar
do?
with
Wow.
classy.
Yeah, he
I'm
called
familiar
people
with
pencil
classy
neck.
Freddie Blassie. Yep,
Yeah, he did that. He called everybody pencil neck geek. But
yep.
geek was the first time I ever heard that word. I remember I had to look it up in the dictionary. What is this thing? A geek? What is a geek? Pencil neck geek. And I knew it was a skinny guy with a, event. So I
I
figured
like
it.
wrestling from even
Yeah.
back
But
then.
anyway, so I
Like
go the wrestling.
I said, I like
So I'm
wrestling
going to
from
take a
even
drink here.
back
Sorry.
then. Like Bruno Sammartino, for example, I think is one of the all-time great champions. And yeah, Freddie
Oh,
Blassie when
when we
he,
did our pre-talk,
yeah.
yeah. When we did our pre-talk, I realized that you and my son would get along really good. My youngest son, he's
Mhm.
39, but he was such a wrestling aficionado. I tried to get him to come to the midget wrestling. He wouldn't do it. He goes, "No, no, no. I just I go to the places where I know all the storylines, all the characters and stuff like that." You know, I mean, he's that heavy duty. But he did say when he comes down to visit me in Mexico, we're going to go see the what do you call it? Something Nacho Libre.
Yeah,
Is that what it's called?
yeah.
Wrestling, Mexican wrestling, where they wear the mask. Yeah. So he finally agreed to go see that with me. So when he gets down here, but the midget wrestling, they fed us dinner and everything. Then they took us, and I brought my manager, and I brought another actress, and then my manager's son is an actor, and brought him. So we had a four of us. They set us right in the front row there and introduced us at some point. I had to get up and wave and everything like that. And then we sat and watched it. And I'm going to tell you something, man. Some of these, and I know midget is the incorrect term, but that's what they were calling their show, midget wrestling and
Hmm.
everything. a couple of them were some of the best athletes I've ever seen, man. I mean, they were running and jumping and I mean, doing all this athletic stuff. And at some point, one point during the middle of the show, and we laughed so hard, man. It was, and everything was, it was about comedy. It was about making it fun in there. And the place was packed. And it was mostly young people, and they were screaming and cheering and just going on. And I turned around at one point and realized all the seats were gone because there were people standing all over the place too. So I guess they let them in. In fact, I started looking for the fire law, thinking, "Oh, I think this is illegal, man." But at one point, they actually came out of the ring and were like fighting in our laps, right, the front row and everything like this. And of course, we're all, and my manager and his son, and his son was a wrestling fan. So he was like 21, but he knew all the wrestlers, and he said he even knew some of the midget wrestlers that were there. And I think two of the midget wrestlers got married after I was there, and I kind of took to both of them too. I thought, they would make a nice couple, and sure enough, they got married. But anyway, it was so much fun. So whenever he a couple of times he had gotten a hold of me again to come see his show, but now I'm down in Mexico, and I think I may have sent something to him. Hey, if you're ever in Guadalajara, because I'm only like less than an hour from Guadalajara, I could come down the hill, the mountains to see it and everything like that. I don't think he ever, I don't even know if he got back to me or not, but but that was so much fun, man. It kind of took me back to when I was a kid because I didn't know all the characters and everything, but pretty quickly you get introduced to them and you get what they're about. And some of them were just hysterical. Well, he took me backstage after it was over and he wanted me to do what we're doing right now and to help promote midget wrestling, right? And so he introduced me and Roadhouse, that's the one where usually I get asked to do, panels and things like that because that's kind of it became a cult favorite. I've been asked to, yeah, I've done screenings and Q&As and things like that for many, many times. But I got to the point where I hated doing it. It's funny because Tommy got a hold of me and I thought, oh man, I don't want to do another one of these Roadhouse things. I was starting to feel like a singer that had like a one hit, and it was like, oh man. But then Tommy said to me, he goes, "Yeah, man, I've had a lot of people from your movie on," and I'm thinking, okay, Terry Funk, Sam Elliott, or whatever, like that. And he goes, "Yeah, Barbara Winnery, Chip McAllister." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, Hamburger is one of my favorite movies." I said, "Dude, I'm doing it. I'm doing it." And then of course Tommy's the one that told me about you, or you got a hold of me and told me you was your friend and everything. But it's funny because the Roadhouse stuff is, I mean, literally monetarily, it was by far the most I ever made in a movie. Just because once it went to the rental, I mean, domestically it only did 58 million in the United States that first week because that's always important. And for a Joel Silver movie, which he always did like Schwarzenegger's movies, Bruce
Yep.
Willis movies. In fact, the movie that we saw a screening of before we started filming Roadhouse, because I was one of the main people in the cast, they did a screening at 20th Century Fox, and it was of Die Hard. And I remember
Hmm.
Die Hard. I remember I was sitting on the edge of my seat that whole movie, and I remember finally it was over. I remember going, oh yeah, I'm going, whew, I can finally breathe. Oh my God, it was so exciting and everything. So that was Joel Silver's movie right before Roadhouse, and that did 100 million easy, man, the first week and everything. We only did 58 million, so it was considered failure by Joel Silver. But here's the thing: once it went to the rental market, remember they had the tapes back then, the VHS.
Yep.
It went to that the places that rented those, and then it went on to cable, and it just caught fire, man. And for years, I have the last line in the movie, and the line is "Polar bear follow me," and people for years would call me up, and this is before they had caller ID.
Hmm.
So they call me up and they go, "Polar bear fell on me." They'd hang up on me like that. And my wife and I are looking, did you recognize? I don't know who that was. I have no idea. I remember a girl, a friend of mine, a woman, she sent me a postcard from like Europe somewhere, Italy or France or someplace like that. And all she wrote on it was, "A polar bear fell on me," and then signed her name. And her name wasn't legible. And for the longest time, I kept going, I think that's her, but I'm not sure. Then when she got back and everything, I got a hold of her and she said, "Yeah, that was me." I said, but that's all she said. Polar bear follow me. So it's like, oh, it's kind of iconic. My cousin had called me. Now I had once a couple of awards for that movie: best actor in a bad movie, or best supporting actor in a bad movie, and then favorite character bad movie edition. So I had those two things. My cousin called me and said, "Oh no, Johnny, you're not going to," from Kentucky. She says, "You're not going to believe this." And I said, "What? What, Patty?" She said, there's a new thing online. It's called the 25 greatest last lines in movie history. You're number 24. And I go, get out of here. Now I went and I listened to that thing. Every other one there was a classic film. The Godfather, Some Like It Hot, Nobody's Perfect, with
Yep.
Joey Brown and Jack Lemmon,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
I've
um,
got it here.
Casablanca. I mean, all of these great, great films. What About Eve? And I'm number 24. I'm in that group, and it was like, oh my God, man. So, and it's funny because I could have rode that pony for a long time, but I literally got tired of it because I felt like, damn, I'm like a one-hit wonder. People have no idea that that's about that much of my career because I did stand-up comedy, I did theater, I did 11 or 12 what do you call it, um, pilots. Now pilots don't get picked up. They don't. IMDb doesn't even recognize them unless they make it to network. And a lot of times, a lot of stuff I did in old movies, I keep waiting for Hollywood High to disappear. They just disappear. They were on IMDb at one time. Now I do admit I have a common name, John Young. I think we talked about this.
Hmm.
And when IMDb first came out, like in I think '97 is when somebody came and said, "Hey, man, I saw you on this thing called International Movie Database." And I said, "What?" They said, "Yeah, I saw your name and the thing like that. You're like really down there low and everything like that." And I go, "Really? Okay, well, what was it like that?" And so she turned me on to it and everything. I went and I looked under. I was John Young number one, number three, number seven, John W. Young. So they had my credits like and all these different guys and everything, and they still didn't get them right. And I think you had mentioned a couple of movies that I don't think I was in that's on there now. And anyway, so I'm not sure what it is, but I've had a lot of movies disappear, that were on there before. Like I did an All in the Family. It's not on there. I did a Benson. I had a really nice little walk on with Benson. It's not on there. A few others and some movies, some pilot, of course, none of the pilots, no commercial. I did over 300 commercials as a speaking act. Well, they weren't all speaking, but I was the principal actor, over 300. Those are not on there. None of the stand-up comedy. I did a lot of voiceover work, not on there, and everything. So people don't know that you see actors and you think, oh my God, yeah, they were in this movie and they were in that movie. I think that's all they've done. People don't know it, man. They're doing stuff all the time behind. I was in loop groups. You know what loop groups are? You see a movie, right?
Oh, I do
And
know.
there's
Yeah,
like maybe a big
looping.
crowd
Yeah.
scene.
Looping. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, there's loop groups. Now, looping is like I've looped in movies where I've had to go in to loop my voice over my character.
Hmm.
So and so I've done that quite often. But loop groups, what they do is they get together and they do like the background noises. Like if you like a busy street and you hear
Hmm.
people going, "Hey, Johnny, hey," literally these people that work on these loop groups, that's what they do. Now I got involved with a couple of those for a few years, and so we're making money. We're making money as actors and everything, but it's not showing up anywhere. Nobody knows. So you do a lot of stuff like that. And I remember somebody said to me one time, I got a buddy. He does a lot of student films, and he's been an actor as long as I have. He's probably got 150 credits on IMDb, but there's only like maybe one or two that really have any gravitas, and have any weight. And then I know John Cazale,
Yeah.
who played Frito in The Godfather. He
Hmm.
literally, if you look him up on IMDb, I don't know how many credits, but I remember I looked him up one time when somebody had told me that, and he literally had, I don't know, like five, six, seven credits. That was it, right? And I thought, this guy's one of the biggest stars, iconic, movie actors of all time, and that's all the credits he's got. And yet, my buddy, who's never done anything except student films, he's got 150. Somebody looks at that and go, God, this guy works all the time. Look at 150. He never got paid for any of them. That's what student films are. You do it basically for free. So, it is what it is, man. But, so IMDb, they make mistakes a lot and everything. I just take it with a grain of salt. Two of my boys are in the Directors Guild. They've got more credits than I do now. And but and one of my boys, I remember he was on the Antiques Roadshow. You ever heard of that show? Antiques Roadshow used to be on PBS, where people would come in and they would want to get an evaluation of one of their family antiques. And so the professionals would tell them how much it was worth. And a lot of the times they were worth nothing. Every once in a while you'd find Jim. I remember I remember who the artist was. Well, I think it was Picasso. It was somebody of a famous artist who was from Europe. and somebody found it at a garage sale and they bought it and they thought that it could be, and it was authentic and it really was worth millions of dollars. And this guy bought it at a garage sale for like $5 or something like that. Anyway, my son was on that for like a season, right? And I said, Ryan, I was looking at IMDb. I don't see any of your Antique Roadshows on there at all. And he did the whole season. And he said to me, he says, Dad, do you think I want to be known for Antique Roadshow? A lot of people have no idea what it is, like you. you know, so I thought, okay, and everything. So I said, "Oh, okay." So whenever those things kind of disappear, I just figure, oh, you know what? It's fate, man. In fact, I called him at one time. God, what was the movie or show? I did a movie where I was one of two Americans in the movie, and I was the bad guy. I was the antagonist. So throughout the movie, I get into a fist fight and I beat a guy up and I steal a famous painting out of the Middle East. And all the other actors were like European. We had one Mexican woman who supposedly was she was supposed to be Mexico's Elizabeth Taylor, I think is what we were told. And then we had a lot of Middle Eastern actors. Then we had some English actors, and I think there was someone from Spain. But we were the only two Americans, and we jokingly called each other the ugly American and the handsome American because Steve Stevenson was a soap opera star, and he had been on soap operas for about 7 or 8 years at that point. So he was well known, making a good living and everything. Had a nice, beautiful house up in Bel Air. I said, "Bro, you're doing okay, man. I'd stick to this soap opera stuff, man. If it's making you a lot of money." But anyway, the movie never got released in the United States. It got released in Europe. It got released in the Middle East, and with all of those actors and everything. And anyway, but at one point it was on my thing on IMDb, so I don't know who put it on there, but it was on there. The director was an Iranian actor who had moved to Beverly Hills, and she was living here and raising her family and everything, but she was a filmmaker. So she was going to film it here in the United States and then had to go back and film a lot in other places too. And so I got to know her real well. In fact, I tried to look her up and find her. And I think she's still a filmmaker, but I don't know if the film changed names or what. But I called IMDb at the time and I said, "Hey, I just want to know what happened to that movie that I did. It was called Legal Aliens, I think it was called, or something like that." And I said, "It just has disappeared." And it was on there, and I played one of the major roles. In fact, I had a screening of it. I took my son, who was then 10 years old, who's now 44, shows you how long ago the movie was made. And it was screened at Zoetrope Studios, which was Francis Ford's place, Francis Ford Coppola's place. So it was screened there and everything. And after the movie was over, I had to go to the bathroom really bad, so I stood up real quick, to go to the bathroom. When I stood up, they started applauding, and I thought, who? And I looked around and I realized it was for me. And my son stood up and he just hugged me, and I could tell he was so proud. Boy, that made me feel so good, and everything. So I knew that, that the character I did worked in the movie. And it was a rough cut of the film was a rough cut. Rough cut means that, they haven't
Hmm.
done post sound, post music, stuff like that. So you're seeing the acting and the available sound that was when you made the movie and everything, but still it worked even as a rough cut. So I thought, oh, okay, well, that's weird. So I called him, IMDb, somebody gave me a number to call him and everything. And this guy gets on there and he goes, "Well, sir, first of all, you have to go and get four four affirmations that this movie." And I said, "Wait a minute, what do you mean I have to go get? You have to get four affirmations that this movie was done by you and this is you and the everything." I get, "Wait a minute, time out, man. Isn't this your business? This is not my business." And he goes, "Well, no, sir, that's the way we do it now. We'll take a lot of things off if we don't know if other sources and everything." I go, "Look, I'll tell you what, man. Do me a favor. Take my name off of the whole IMDb. You don't have to. I don't have to be on there. I'm not gonna go do. I'm not gonna go do your job, bro. And I just thought, what the hell, dude? And I was trying to be nice to the guy in the very beginning, but he kind of started getting snooty with me, and that's when I kind of exploded on him. Said, "Dude, take me off, man. I don't need you. I can work without that and everything." Of course, I didn't know that eventually they would have this professional IMDb, and I know I had a manager, or I think it was a new agent, who said, "No, you got to buy the professional IMDb because you get hired by that, and you can see who's hiring and who's doing what and everything." But yeah, I had to kick out a couple of $100 a year or something like that. And I thought, okay, at some point after being on there for about 4 or 5 years, and I remember they had about 60 photographs and about I don't know how many videos, like, I don't know, 5, 6 videos of me in different things that were on IMDb. But then when I decided after about 4 years, I'm not going to pay for that anymore. I really don't need it. So I stopped the payment and everything. They took my picture off. They took all of those other pictures off. They took off all the videos. And I thought, why did they do that and everything? And a friend of mine told me, he said, did you have IMDb Pro at one time? I said, yeah, but I realized I really didn't need it. I didn't want to keep kicking out the money for it. And he goes, dude, that's what they do now. It's like, if you take your money away from them, they almost treat you as if you don't exist. So I remember there were times that I think, I'm trying to remember, there was one picture that was kind of, people kind of recognized me. They would see that picture and they go, "Oh, I've seen that guy. Oh, that's you." I go, "Yeah." And they go, "Oh my God, man! Yeah, I've seen that picture 100 times." Anyway, so it was kind of a nice thing. But now you look up IMDb and I think it's blank. I think, or maybe there's one. I did a TV show. I get cast as a recurring character on Jane Lynch's TV show, like maybe a year or two ago, and I think they had a picture of me on there with Maggie Lawson, who was her co-star on the show and everything. But sometimes it shows up and sometimes it doesn't. I have no idea why or what, but kind of weird, and yeah, I used to have some of remember the awards I told you about, best best supporting actor in a bad movie. I asked a casting. I was at a casting thing one time, and they had all like a crew of casting directors, like 10 of them on stage, and so they were taking questions from the audience, and I stood up and I said, "So let me ask you something. I won some awards, but they're not really prestigious awards." And I said, best supporting actor in a bad movie, and then favorite character bad movie edition. And at that time I hadn't heard from my cousin about the number 24 on the last lines. And I said, should I ever mention that to anybody? Should I include that somewhere? And they all said, hell yeah, because that gives us a selling tool we can sell our producer to, or our director to. It's like, man, do you realize that he's won these awards? Even though they seem like they're bad awards to you, they're not. They're good awards. They actually help us in trying to sell you, to get you apart. And I thought, wow, okay. I had no idea, because I had those for a long time, and I kept it quiet for like over 20 years. I was kind of embarrassed. But anyway, it is what it is. Uh,
I have a few
Excuse me, I'm
films.
gonna drink again.
Yeah, I have a few films I want to talk about.
Hmm.
I got this on Blu-ray, Back to School,
I gotta.
and
Oh, back to school. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, Rodney. Yeah.
yeah, I love Back to School, and of course, you have mentioned to me that you no longer have the Melon Patch Kid, and I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, of course you don't. They're abandoned.
That's good, man. Very good.
Talk
Every
about,
once in a while, somebody will quote that line to me.
yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's weird. And I know Back to School at the time was very popular.
I
I
love
don't know if
Back to
it,
School. I've done
yeah.
a few interviews from it. A couple of people from Oingo Boingo. I've had Adrian Barbeau on here. I've had Bill Kinnison on here in tribute to Sam,
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I love Back to School. And I had Leslie Scarborough on here, who was the shower girl when Rodney uh, pulls back. He goes, "You're perfect," and she come on here and she had like a towel wrapped around her on the Zoom, and I was like, "Did I get you at a bad time?" She goes, "No." She said, "I'm the towel girl in the shower." I said, "I have looked the part," and she had a bottle of wine there. We're celebrating the anniversary of the film, and I was like, "This is so cool,"
Oh, how
And
cool, man.
she had a great sense of humor. But I wanted to ask about that prop of the Melon Patch Kid, and I also wanted to ask what it was like working with Rodney Dangerfield and director Alan Metter.
Alan, I didn't get to know that well. I mean, like basically I had two days on the shoot. Like I said, I had a beginning and a middle scene, and the last scene was cut. I think they ended the movie with Rodney diving off the diving board, if I remember
Yep.
right. But originally there was like a bookend scene. And anyway, but I didn't get to know Alan that well. I mean, he seemed like a really nice guy, very cordial, very polite. Seemed easy to get along with from what I saw. Now, Rodney was a character and a half. I'd seen him at the Comedy Store a number of times do his stand-up act, and of course Johnny Carson show. I mean, he's just hysterical. And he was doing kind of old Borscht Belt kind of comedy and everything. And there would be guys that would come up and they would they would try to do that, but they didn't have the hook that Rodney had. And Rodney's hook was, I get no respect. That was his hook. So whenever in doubt and everything, he'd always go, yeah, I get no respect. My dad told me to look both ways when I cross the street, up and down, stuff like that. But he was really good. We auditioned, Melissa Scoff was the casting director, and she had cast me in a lot of movies. And in fact, she cast House, she cast
Hmm.
Hamburger. Uh,
Hmm.
what else did she cast? Anyway, she cast me in a lot of movies and everything, and she called me in for that. And again, I was at that point where I was getting scripts ahead of time, so I was getting to read them. And I came in and I said, well, when she brought me in the room, the only one that was in the room, and I thought this was gonna be with the producer, and it was me, her, and Rodney. And so Rodney's there, and I'm going, "Hey, how you doing, man?" And he goes, yeah, hey, kid, I've seen you around the comedy store." I say, "Yeah, man, nice to see you again," like that. Now he's calling me kid. I'm like 35, 36 years old or whatever it is. But anyway, so I say, "Well, Melissa, listen, I know I read the script. I know that you want me to play this guy that's the on his board of directors, on his sales, on his company, but with the melon patch doll and everything." I said, "But could I read for like, the dean?" Which I had no idea was going to be Ned Beatty and everything, because I was 35 and
And I
it wasn't
thought
like
that
I
was
was a
funny. He
baby.
played Dean Martin.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I asked to do another one of the professors or something like that, and she just turned and looked at Rodney, and Rodney said, "Yeah, let the kid do it," like that. So we read together, and Rodney read the other roles. She didn't read them, Rodney did, and so I read with Rodney and everything, and uh, and of course, eventually they just cast me in the role they brought me in for, which was the melon patch, kid scene, So it
That's a
was kind of good and
standout.
everything, but Rodney was good. Every time I would see him on the set, he'd go, "Hey, how's the kid? It's the kid, guy. This is the kid, guys." So evidently, it turns out that I was the only one that he actually read with before the movie was made. So it was kind
I
of
like
special in that
Rodney.
respect. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do too. My friend Edie McClurg played his secretary in the movie. Do you remember
She
her with
was
the red
on
hair?
she also played his wife in Natural Born Killers.
See, I didn't even know that, man.
Hmm.
And I'd known Edie for years and years and years. In fact, she had held two of my boys when they were babies, Ryan and Dylan. And her McClurg, so she's Irish, Scotch Irish. And so she was so proud that their names were Ryan and Dylan, and everything like that. So anyway, we were really good friends. And Donovan Scott, who was an actor and we were in the Beverly Hills Playhouse also
He's in
with all
Police
those other
Academy.
people I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
What's that?
He was in Police Academy.
Anyway, yeah, she had said that Donovan Scott and I she said to some people that we were her two best friends. I thought that was kind of cool. Donovan Scott on those Lifetime and Hallmark channels. There's two channels, and they do all these kind of syrupy, made for television movies. Every time there's a Santa Claus, it's usually Donovan, because now he's older and he's grown the big full beard. And for a while, I wore a big beard too. I was Mariah Carey Santa Claus in one of her specials, TV specials one year. So I did that for a while. I was doing a lot of charity events and things like that. But I would go in for auditions, and they would have the usual 25, 50 Santa Clauses, real bearded Santa Clauses. In fact, I did a couple of jobs after I shaved my beard off, but they liked me so much as an actor, they asked me to do the job anyway, with put a fake beard on. And I thought the whole purpose was to get a real bearded Santa Claus. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, Edie was in it, and yeah, who else was in it? I'm trying to think. There were a couple of other people I'd worked with a couple of times. There was a guy that was sitting across the executive table from me. He was smoking a cigar. I'd worked with him in another film too, and I can't remember his name anymore. I'm getting old, Greg. I'm telling you, man. My memory is it's gone. But
Talk about that Melon Patch Kid prop.
well, the funny thing was that it was really really light. It wasn't heavy. And
Hmm.
so the thing about it is, I remember the first time I was doing a rehearsal, I went to grab that thing like this, and I went like that, and it almost flew out of my hand. It was like so light.
Hmm.
And I asked the prop guy, I said, "Hey man, is there any way you can kind of weight this down?" So I think he put some kind of a weight on the back of it. So when I picked it up and everything, kind of have a little weight to it and everything. But then the first time I went to grab it, and almost went flying across the room. We weren't filming, so thank God. But that's when I realized, yeah, can you make this a little bit heavier? And he did. But it's funny because somebody told me after the show, they said, "Man, you should have asked if you could have that." for your character and everything like that. And I said, I didn't think about it, but I bet somebody took it. So when, he's abandoned, it's like, well, I abandoned him there, so, but yeah, but it was kind of fun. Yeah.
I remember Barbeau shared a story. I asked her, I said, "Did you give Rodney any respect?" And she goes, "Well," she said, "I'll tell you something. He may not have thought he had respect, but every day at his trailer there'd be a line of women."
Wow. See, I didn't even know that, man. Adrian, if I remember right, at that time, she was married to John Carpenter.
Hmm.
And I had met John Carpenter. I had done a class at Sherwood Oaks Experimental Film College, like in the 70s. And one of the classes, I took a number of classes there, but one of the classes was up and coming new film directors. And we had like Spielberg, um, John Carpenter was one of them. What's his name that wrote, that did Star Wars, all the Star Wars movie.
George Lucas.
God, what's his name? Famous. George
George
Lucas, yeah.
Lucas, yeah.
Martin Scorsese's was one of them. George Lucas,
Hmm.
yeah. George Lucas is, it's funny. It was that class was so long ago. And what they would do is each director would come in. There's 12 of us in the class. Each director would come in and they would show a film, and then after the film, we would do a Q&A with the director for about 45 minutes to an hour, and it was fun, man. It was really neat. And what was the point I was going to make? John Carpenter was one of them, and everything like that. But the George Lucas thing. George Lucas comes in, and I didn't know who he was. I'd never seen him or anything like that, and heard of him. And he brought in his thesis film from USC Film School. It was his thesis film, and it was $1 million budget on like a college film. It's his grad thesis film, right? So anyway, he brings it in, and he has an actor with him, and the actor was really bad. And I was an actor, first I was going to be an actor and everything, but seemed like a nice guy and everything. But it's funny because it was called THX something.
PHX
THX. It was about,
1138.
yeah, that was his graduate thesis film at USC, right?
Hmm.
His alien. He had an alien. It was a beach ball with feet because he said, well, our budget was a
Oh,
million
you're
dollars, but
talking about THX 1138. That is George Lucas. Now the Beach Ball Feet, I think, is Dark Star. That's John Carpenter.
oh, you know what?
I think
Maybe
you're
that's what
mixing
because
up
John
two
Carpenter's one.
films.
Ah,
Yeah,
wow. See, there you go, man. My memory is getting to the point I'm starting to mix things up. Yeah.
yeah.
Darn. Yeah, but I do remember John Carpenter was on there and everything. And then I remember, I think I saw a couple of years later that he was married to Adrienne Barbeau. And I
Hmm.
was like, oh, wow, good for you, John. You did well, man. And then I met him again years later, and Daryl Hannah was in his office. And she
Hmm.
she was really mean to me. And I was doing a survival job. I was dropping off a script for, William Morris or somebody like that. And I said hi. I recognized who she was. I had just seen Splash,
Hmm.
and I said hi. Is John Carpenter here? It was one of the studios, and John Carpenter here. I've got a script for him like that. And she just goes. She didn't say, "No, he's not here." She just goes like this and points back there like that without looking up, and everything's chewing gum or something like that. And I thought, okay, well, I guess she was a nice one. But anyway, I don't know if I know he's married to Neil Young now.
I
Um,
don't know, but
yeah, yeah.
1986 was a big year for you, not just back to school, but I mean, house where you were up front of that line there. Now, I've had the grocery boy that's at the beginning of the film. He's been on the show here, and met William Catt at Chiller, and I got him to
Yeah,
sign
yeah.
a picture from House. What a gentleman William Catt is, I gotta say.
Well, you
Made a
know who
good.
his mom was, right? You know who his mom was? Raymond Burr had a TV series where he played a lawyer,
Hmm.
uh, famous lawyer. I can't remember what it was
Harry
called.
Mason, yeah.
Perry Mason. His mom played his secretary on the show.
Oh,
I can't
okay.
remember. Character's name was Peggy or something like that, and she was like one of the regulars every week. So he came into royalty already. His mom was like a star on TV. In the 50s and 60s. But anyway, yeah, yeah. William Catt was a nice guy, really nice guy and everything.
I
The
met
funny
him
thing
at,
about that one was,
I was going to say, when I met him at Chiller, one
mhm.
thing I noticed with him is every fan that come up to get an autograph, like he'd come in out from around the table, he'd shake their hand, and he reminded me of John Rhys Davies in this way. He would ask questions to the fans. And I remember,
Oh,
there,
nice.
there was this mother and son coming up to him, and the son had just graduated high school, and
Uh-huh.
William Catt was asking him what he wanted to do. He's going to go to college, and he asked him what college, and he engaged with him. I was like, wow, William Catt's a
I
stand-up
love that.
guy. Yeah, what a
Yeah, I
stand-up
love that
guy.
man.
Yeah. So I really like William
He
Catt.
probably
I've never
he
had
was
him
the
on here.
All-American Hero.
Yeah,
His first TV show was the big one
greatest
was
American
All-American
hero.
Hero.
But one thing about
Yeah.
him is
And he was really good, you know.
you had that funny that there's this. I love that scene, the book selling, where he's signing autographs, and you had all these odd characters coming up to get signatures. You had the woman with the mohawk, he goes, nice hair, and she goes, thanks, and
Yeah.
the woman, the overweight one that's just excited, and you come up there and you're like,
You know who that was? I don't know if you know who she is. Mindy Sterling. She was what was the movie where they did the little Pinky Mike Myers movie?
yeah,
Uh, she was the German mistress. I know you probably saw that when you're a comedy guy. So
yep,
God, I wish I could think of it.
Austin Powers,
Austin
yeah,
Powers. Yeah,
yeah.
Austin Powers. That's Mindy Sterling. You know, this she literally became a star from it. She'd always been like a character actor like me, but I think we were right next to each other in line, so we talked a little bit. And years later, we were doing something. A musical thing, and everything like that. And I recognized her, or maybe they introduced her, said, and I mentioned her, that I'm John Young. I was a friend of Steve Miner who directed that House. Originally, I don't know if I told you the story about House or not. I get confused at times. House was actually I had met Steve Miner and I had met at the Beverly Hills Playhouse, and we just had our second baby. Dylan was born. And at the Beverly Hills Playhouse, this is when before cell phones, if you had to make a phone call, you had to go down and get on the pay phone, right? Which was down in the basement where the bathrooms were. So I had gone down, and I loved, the classes, and everybody had always asked me to be in their class if they needed a bartender, or they needed a waiter, or just a policeman or cop or something like. They would ask me to do it, and I'd do it because I love creating characters, and I'd do it for fun, right? So anyway, everybody would see a lot of my work, and then I had my own scenes that I would bring in to do, and I'd choose, the actors to do it. Anyway, I go down there, I'm calling my wife, and she's like 2 days. He's 2 days old, so she's just home from the hospital. He's 2 days old. I had a class, so I had my survival job during the day. Then I had to go to the class and everything. So I hadn't seen my baby, since I was in the hospital, seeing him born. So I get on the phone and I call, hey, babe, how you doing? Yeah, we got probably at least a couple more hours to go and everything. I said, listen, why don't you put the phone up to Dylan's ear? I want to talk to him because one of the things I used to do when my kids were born, before they were born, I would talk to them when they were in mama's stomach. And I wanted them to hear daddy's voice, and I would sing to them and things like that. So she put the phone up to Dylan's thing, and I said, hey, Dill, it's dad doing. How you doing, buddy? Listen, I'm at acting class right now, just getting here, trying to get my craft better and everything so I can help make a good living so I can make your life really, really good as you grow up and everything. I love you, son. I'm so glad you're in my life and everything. And listen, whatever your mommy does and everything, just know she loves you as much as I do. And I said, okay. So let me talk to your mommy again. And she got back on the phone. I said, okay, babe, but it's about 2 more hours and then I'll be able to get out of here and leave and everything. Okay. Love you. I love you. Save me a place in the bed. Okay. I'll see you then. Bye. Got off the phone. There's a guy standing behind me like that. And he goes, hey, were you talking to a baby? And I said, my wife just had a baby too, finally from the hospital too. I said, wow, no kidding. He says, yeah, I was going to call and talk to my baby and my wife too. He says, that is so weird and everything. He goes, I'm Steve, man. I go, I'm John, man. Nice to meet you like that. And he goes, listen, I've been watching a lot of your work. You're really good. I really enjoy watching your work and everything. And he goes, listen, I'm not an actor. I'm a director. And he goes, listen, I want to direct Al and the Pussycat, a scene from that. And I was wondering if you would be in it for me. And I said, I know the play very well, right? And and this was like a class of about 90 people at Milton Kitselis' a place at the Beverly Hills Playhouse. And I said, Steve, to be honest, man, out of those 90 people, half of them are men. I go, there's probably at least 20, 30 guys that are more suited for that role than I am, man, because I know the play and everything. But he says, no, no, what, John, okay, you don't understand. I'm getting ready to direct a movie and everything, and I might want to put you in the movie. So I'd like to work with you first. And I just thought, I said, okay, all right. And they said, oh, by the way, Camelia Kath is in the movie. I mean, is playing the female role. And I said, Camelia Kath, wait a minute. And he said, yeah, that's the one. She's married to Terry Kath that plays guitar for Chicago. I went, oh, yeah, okay. I know. She's beautiful, man. I said, yeah, let's definitely do this. And, I'm just joking around and everything. So we go to do it and everything and finish it up and everything. And while he's doing that, he goes, listen, I'm helping a writer develop a screenplay that we're going to shoot as a movie. He said, "Well, I'd like you to come and read this one particular character for us and everything. And Ethan's going to write it as we go along. He's going to do rewrites and everything." So we met for, a couple of times a week. And I met Melissa Scoff, who was the casting director there, who literally cast me in Back to School. She cast me in House. She cast me in maybe Hamburger. I'm not sure, a whole bunch of stuff. But anyway, so we go there, and every week we do the table read and everything, and then the next time we would come in, we'd read the table read again. And so at some point, either Ethan or Steve said, we're developing this role for you to do in the movie. And I'm like, wow, really, man? And it was like the second lead in the movie. It was like William Katz's best friend. So it's going along, and we did this for I don't know 3 4 months or something like that, meeting all the time, and literally and they kept saying this is going to be your role, Johnny. It's going to be your role. And then Sean Cunningham came on board. Sean Cunningham
Yep.
has produced a lot of horror films and stuff like
I
that,
just met
Halloween,
him
and
at Frightmare in the
I think.
Falls. Yep.
Well, Sean came on board and he said, "No, no, no, we can't have Johnny do this. We have to have a bigger name to do that role." And George Wendt had just won his second Emmy for Cheers.
Hmm.
And George is a big husky guy too. And so they gave the role to George, but Steve Miner came to me. He says, "No, but Johnny, listen, you got to be in my movie, man. You're like my good luck charm. Whenever you're in my movie does really well." So I said, "Okay, Steve, whatever you want, man." So anyway, so I did the part for him and everything, and that's how I ended up with the smaller part. But I knew that script inside and out, man. So I remember somebody called me at one time, and they wanted me to be to do one of the things in Kentucky that was a horror film festival. I think it was in Louisville, Kentucky. And I said, well, I've only done a couple of horror type films, and they were relatively small roles. And he mentioned Frankenstein General Hospital right away, and I said, yeah, I played a doctor in that. I think I've got like maybe two or three little bitty scenes, and then I'm gone. It's not big and anything like that. And he said, well, you did House, right? And I said, yeah. Well, again, I said, look, I know that script inside and out because I helped develop the script. I might have told him the story I just told you about it. I said, but I only have a small part left in the film. And he goes, still okay. But he goes, I know you did Roadhouse, so you qualify as a heavyweight. So we'd like to have you come. And I said, well, okay, man. I'll tell you what. I I'm from Kentucky, so I get relatives like over in Lexington, which is about 100 miles away. I said, if you guys, I'd like to stay in a hotel so I can stay close because that drive 100 back, 100 back and forth is kind of tedious. I said, if you guys would pay for a room, I prefer that. But if you can't, I'm willing to drive to Lexington and stay there with them and then drive back for, the next day or whatever. But, I prefer to stay in the hotel room and give me rest and everything. And I could be, top form for you guys and everything. And they said, okay, well, let us get back to you. They never did. So I thought, okay, I guess they didn't want me after all. So, but, I thought it was kind of funny. But that's the only time that anybody's ever asked me to be on a show for, someone that does horror films a lot. I know Tommy does a lot of that, so he loves that, but he loves comedies too. And he really is an 80s guy. He knows everything from the 80s just about.
Well, I love that you're in line there, and you're the one that asks him what is William Catt's next novel's going to be, and he says, "My personal experience in Vietnam." You're like, "The war?" And he goes, "Yeah," and he goes, That's he's like he's like you're so unimpressed.
Well, it's funny because when I first read that, I thought, "There's nothing to this, man. I mean, really."
But it's
And
funny,
and
like
Steve
even
said something and said, "Well, maybe he's not so happy that."
like yeah, like even like the last guy goes like like the hat on, he goes, "I'll cherish this always," like I think that scene was funny because it all the weird characters. Of course,
Yeah,
Steve Miner did Friday the
th-
13th parts 2 and 3 as well, so yeah.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
I like House, and of course we got to talk about Hamburger the movie. What a zany movie. Speaking of going back to school,
yeah.
yeah. Well, one interesting little college film that is. Talk about working on Hamburger the movie. Unfortunately, I don't have that here. I don't know if that's even on Blu-ray yet. Maybe it is. I need to check into that. But
No, no. You know what? A guy got a hold of me a few years ago. By now, it's probably 7 or 8 years ago, and he wanted to know. I don't know how he got a hold of me, but he got me, and he said, "Listen, I want to get the rights to Hamburger because it's the only thing it's on is VHS." And I said, "Yeah,"
Mhm.
and I know it was like $79, man, to buy one. I'm in the movie, and I won't even buy one. I'm not going to spend that money for that. And but anyway, so he eventually found. I think it was the director, Mike Marvin. And
Hmm.
eventually, I don't know if they hooked up and everything, but I know Tommy loves that movie a lot, and so he and I talked a lot about it. But it was really an interesting movie. I know when I got the part that there was another stand-up comic who was a heavy set guy also, but he was very, very heady, very I'm physical. I'm a physical actor, and everything. So I do a lot of physical stuff and characters. I'll do characters, and people won't know it. I'm doing an animal, but they have no idea I'm doing an animal. And like Brando in Streetcar Named Desire, he's doing
Uh-huh.
Stanley Kowalski. He's doing him as a gorilla. He's got his beer, right? And he's trying to seduce Blanche, and he's got his beer, and he's shaking it up like this, like he's masturbating, like the gorilla masturbating. And they get into an argument and everything. Yeah, Blanche, how about this? Then he pops the thing off her with the church key, like that, and all the foam comes out. It's almost like he's ejaculating and everything. And when I found out that that's what Brando was doing, I thought I'm doing animal exercises for the rest of my life for characters. So I do those a lot in characters. I don't remember if I did one for Hamburger or not, but I'm very physical. And this other actor, and I think they might have wanted him, or one. I think one of the producers wanted him, and the other two wanted me, and everything. So I wasn't sure if they were going to go with him or me. And it was the last audition is usually the last two guys standing, so we know that it's either him or me that's going to get the part. And I remember I went in and I did some of my physical shtick stuff that I can do, and I made them all laugh. Even the guy who didn't want me laughed. All three of them laughed, and I left. And I thought, I think I got a good chance of getting this movie. Well, I got it, and eventually, and I went to the table read, and the table read, was it a week? I can't remember if that. No, that one wasn't a week. I think it was just. Well, maybe it was. I don't know. Anyway, we had a table read and everything, and then at some point when we got on set and everything, Tommy had told me this too, and said that yeah, they recast certain characters. I said, what's weird, man? Because I think the timing between the table and when I say table read, it was multiple table reads, right? I
Hmm.
said because from the table reads and to the time there was a little bit a lag time, maybe a week or two. And
Hmm.
so I said, when we got together on the set and everything, I thought some of these were different actors. And he goes, yeah, they were. And then it was like, oh my God, yeah. So anyway, I know Chip McAllister was there. Chip and I had remained friends for a while, and in fact, we're on Facebook together and everything. When I
Hmm.
did Shami's show a year and a half ago, it was Chip's birthday when we did it. And I was happy to tell Tommy. I said, "Look, it's today's Chip's birthday, man." And I already sent him a Facebook, happy birthday. And Tommy said, "Yeah, I did too, man." And there were other people in there. You know who Buddy Hackett was?
Oh yeah.
Stand-up comic. Yeah,
Yeah, he was in The Love Bug.
yeah. Well, his son Sandy was in Hamburger. Was one of the
Yep.
main characters too,
Yep.
and we became really good friends. And one time I went to his house. He was living with his dad at the time in Beverly Hills, And his dad had a little elephant on the front lawn because, people would do caricatures of him and they would do a long nose because he had kind of a long nose and everything. So he took that and put an elephant on his front lawn. But his dad told me, he said, you stole the movie, Johnny. And I said, really? I said, come on, man. And he goes, no, you did. I said, your son Sandy did it. He's good, and everything like that. And he goes, no, but you understood what the genre was about and everything. And plus the physical stuff. Buddy Hackett could do physical stuff too. In fact, one of my favorite films was the "It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World" comedy.
Oh yeah.
I love that film. Sandy told me a great story. He said, every day on that film, he goes, my dad would tell me that every actor could not wait to get back to the set the next day to see one of the actors to see what he was going to pull that day. And I was going, really? Now these are all the funniest guys during that era in movies and television and stand-up comedy. They were all the funniest guys. Mickey Rooney,
Hmm.
Milton Berle. I mean, God, I mean, I could go on and on and on. But he said no, it was Jonathan Winters. I was like, what? And Jonathan and I had the same agent, so I knew Jonathan. I'd see him around Toluca Lake and we'd wave. In fact, we had the same bank too. I'd see him in the bank sometimes and everything. He said, Jonathan Winters, he said, man, he was like wacky. He was crazy. And he said, you had all these guys that were, some of the most famous people in the world. And he says, and they weren't the one that everybody couldn't wait to. It was Jonathan Winters, and I thought, wow, yeah, good for him. And of course, Jonathan Winters became Robin Williams' idol and eventually played his dad on Mork and Mindy. And I had been on the Mork and Mindy basketball team. So it was a kind of a big deal too, so there was kind of all of this stuff. But where are we talking about? We're talking about Hamburger, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we did the film and everything, and we shot. It's funny that you mentioned college. We shot at a college called College of the Canyons, which
Hmm.
was in, if you know Los Angeles area, it's like a northern Los Angeles county, but like it's up by Magic Mountain, close to Magic. In fact, it's almost across the road from Magic Mountain, across the highway from Magic Mountain. And we had a studio when I did Roadhouse. We had a studio literally that was like a maybe a mile from there too. So it's like I got to be really familiar with that area. In fact, we had a few days off and we'd go over to Magic Mountain just to play. Some of the actors would get together and do that. It's good, but yeah, Hamburger it was a lot of fun. Lee McCloskey was playing the lead character. Lee and I became pretty good friends, and I met his wife Carla, who was an assistant director, and I think she eventually started producing. Lee was a great artist. The lead in Hamburger, he
Hmm.
was a
Yep.
great artist, man. I mean, he did some stuff that was like he did fine pencil work, where literally he'd be with a magnifying glass doing this. But he was incredible, and he showed me stuff that his dad did. His dad made his living as a professional artist and everything. And I said, "Oh, Lee, you might have missed your calling, man." But I said, "No, he's got a good career as an actor, So, but anyway, but yeah, Sandy Hackett was in it. Barbara Winnery, Chip McAllister, Jack Blessing, who played Zipser, who was funnier than hell. Jonathan Winters was offered the role. I don't tell, and stop me if I told you this. I can't remember who I tell stories to anymore. Jonathan Winters and I had the same agent, and I was
Hmm.
in his office, and I'd gotten the part in Hamburger, so I already knew I had that coming up and everything. And I'm sitting there, and back in those days, you had to bring a picture and resume into the office, and then they'd send them out to the casting people or producers or whoever. So I was bringing those in that day, and Barry Freed, my agent, had me come in and sit in his office. And as he's sitting there, his assistant opens the door and she says, "Barry, Jonathan Winters is on the phone for you." And he looks at me and he goes, John, listen, hold, just sit there, be tight. I got to talk to Jonathan, okay? It's on. He goes, "Hey, Johnny, how you doing?" Like that. Yeah, yeah. No, Johnny, listen. No, Johnny, no, they made you the offer, Johnny, no, no, don't, Johnny, you don't want to, Johnny, you want to take the money. This is good money. They're gonna give it to Johnny, no, Johnny. Okay, all right, sure, okay, Johnny, all right. Well, listen, if you change your mind, let me know. I'm gonna call you back and check anyway. Okay, like that. He answered the phone. And I could tell he was upset. So I said, "Barry, what's wrong?" And he goes, "Oh, Jonathan Winters. Jonathan Winters was going to be in Hamburger, your movie, right? They for 1 week's work, they were going to pay him $100,000." And I said, "Well, so what was the problem?" He goes, "When they offered him the job originally, they offered him a lot less money." And Jonathan said, "I'll only do it if you give me 100,000." And they said, "Okay, well, let us get back to you." And he said they got off the phone, and Jonathan was just calling back, and he said, I left a message, that they want to offer you the movie, they want to counter the offer. The offer before was maybe 20,000 or something like that. So he said, and so Jonathan told me, he says, you know what? They didn't want to hire me immediately. They didn't want to say yes, so fuck them. They can go hire some second-rate banana or whatever. So they hired Chuck McCann, who was really a good character actor, one
Yeah.
of my favorite character actors. He had a commercial years ago, and I did a lot of commercials. And he had one where a guy is getting ready to shave, and he opens up his the mirror. What do you call that? The behind the mirror like that. And he opens it up like that.
Hmm.
And there's a guy on the other side. He goes, "Oh, how you doing, guy?" Well, that was Chuck McCann, and it was a very famous commercial for years and years and years. Anyways, but Chuck ended up doing it for 10 grand for the week's work. And I remember that a lot of people were really upset, but I think Chuck did a pretty good job for what it was. But they could have had Jonathan Winters if they would have just paid an extra 90 grand. But that's showbiz, man. That's the way it goes. Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. We got to improvise a lot. In fact,
Hmm.
I ended up kind of writing a couple of scenes in the movie. I mean, I had done Hamburger. No, I had done Hollywood High, and in that scene in that movie, we had a food fight. I had almost got what was the famous one? Animal House. They did a food fight in that movie. They
Yeah.
did it in one other movie, on Porky's or something like that. I can't remember
Hmm.
now. But anyway, they in the original script, which was terrible, they had a food fight in it, and I thought, oh, geez, we're going for cliches now and everything. So they fired one director and they hired a new director, and he basically told us, we're going to do a lot of improvising, guys, so if you got input, give it to me. But so he started saying, man, I don't know what to do with this scene. And I said, well, it's a food fight. And I says, well, you know my work, you've already seen me in one food fight, and Animal House, they did a food fight and everything. He goes, I know, I hate this. He goes, I don't know what to do. So I said, okay, have you seen the movie? Because maybe I'll don't have to explain it
Yep.
as much. But in the movie, my character's on a diet throughout the whole movie. So I did this thing called aversion therapy, where I would put this electrical thing on my finger, and it would shock the hell out of my character. So I'm spazzing out throughout the whole movie. It's kind of like my running gag of my character, right? So I say to Donald, the director, I put you got me scene, I'm putting this thing on the table where I'm trying to get away from the food and I'm trying to shock myself. How about if I'm spazzing out and I go out in the dance floor and I start doing stuff and people think I'm inventing a dance and they start repeating the dance, and then I'll go and knock some tables over, I'll knock a waiter over like that. Maybe I'll knock somebody into the pool and then people can start jumping in the pool. And he goes, well, that's good, man. I like that and everything. He goes, but what's the button? How do we get out of this? And I said, okay, that's easy. I'm going to knock the nun into the pool because there was a character who was a nun. I'm going to knock her into the pool, and then I'm going to come up out of the pool, and she's going to be on my back, and I'm going to spit the water out. And I've already established this line. And I go, I'm not hungry. So, and he says, that's perfect, man. So I pretty much wrote that scene. What I didn't realize was that doing this whole spastic thing across this great big set and everything like this, by the time I hit the water, I was exhausted. I had no air. I almost drowned, man. And they had a whole bunch of suits and everything, and so I had a lot of changes and everything. And after about the second or third one, I said, you know what? I don't think I can do this anymore, man, because this is really taxing. Because by the time I hit the water, I guess I'm gasping for air, so my mouth's open, the water goes right in right away. And thank God. And I said, please have spotters close by to get me out of the water immediately. So anyway, so we did that, and there were a couple of other scenes that I kind of wrote, and they kept in the movie, which is kind of fun. There was some funny lines in there. The guy who played Lyman Vunk, who's the older owner, he's kind of like Kentucky Colonel, right? But his name was
Hmm.
Lyman Vunk, and it was a hamburger place. It wasn't Kentucky Fried Chicken, but he was like that kind of a character. But I got to be friends with him when he was in his 90s. This is like 20, 20, 25 years after we did the movie, and he was in his 90s, almost senile. And I remember going up to him and I go, Charlie, you're not going to believe this, man, but you and I had the same line in this movie together, and some other people had the line too. And he goes, oh, yeah, what was the line? I go, put those cookies back, motherfucker. And he said, I said that? He didn't even remember, right? I mean, that's how much he remembered of the movie. I said, not only did we say that, you taught it in a class. You were teaching us how to say that. And then later in the movie, we're actually in the restaurant, and there's a little bitty girl, young girl, and she went grabbed a box of cookies, and we all stop what we're doing. We all turn around and look at her and go, "Put those cookies back, motherfucker!" But anyway, I just love telling that story with Charlie, and he was such a sweet. He lived in the Horace Height Estates. It was a very famous place that actors and dancers used to live in, like the 50s, and built this. But it was an old, quaint old place that was like at 40s, 50s style, bungalows and everything around the pool. And it was really a great, great place. But he was in there, and I think a lot of people used to retire there. If you couldn't get into the retirement home at the actors' retirement place out in Calabasas, that would be a place that people would go there and they'd pay for their own way there. So he was there and eventually passed away, and I was really sad. But good guy. Randy Brooks played his wife, quote unquote wife, young, pretty girl with boobs and stuff like that. And I think Buddy Hackett's son Sandy was always chasing her, and was always trying to make love to her, have sex with her, and stuff like that. So that was pretty much his character's premise and everything. And let's see, Dick Butkus, of course, played the drill sergeant. Dick Butkus was the greatest linebacker in NFL history. I mean, he was that good, right? And
Hmm.
so we became friends. It was hard to get to know him at first, but then once we became friends, it was really, really good. But he and I became friends, and I had a survival job. After we did that movie, I let my hair grow long and I had a full beard. Of course, I was a lot younger, so it was dark and
Hmm.
everything. So I didn't look much like I did. It was about 6 months later, and I was working a survival job. In fact, I was delivering a script from William Morris again, and I had a script going up to Dick But, or maybe it was contracts, to Dick Butkus's house, and I had the big full beard. I was embarrassed, man, because I thought, here I was 6 months ago, I was starring in a movie with him and everything. Now I'm doing a menial job just to make sure I could pay the rent and things, keep food on the table for my kids. And so I had to go up to his house. He was up on a hill in Malibu overlooking the ocean, big, beautiful house. And I thought, oh man. And I had to do it, man, because that was my job, right? So
Hmm.
I thought, okay. So I rang the doorbell, and I was hoping that maybe somebody else would answer, but he answers the door. And I've got sunglasses on, and it's almost sundown, right? I've got sunglasses on, I've got the big full beard and the hair and everything. And I go, delivery for Dick Butkus, please, like that. And he looks at me and he pauses for a second. And he goes, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like that. And I go, um, I'm really embarrassed, Dick. I'm really embarrassed, man. I got to work this job and everything. He goes, "Shut the fuck up. Put that shit down right there on the table. Come on in here. Let's sit down and have a drink." So I go into his place, right? And we sit down, we have a drink. And at that time I was drinking. I don't drink anymore, but I used to drink. And so I had a drink with him. He goes, "So you got to get going." I go, "Well, this is my last stop." And, then I'm going to the valley to go home with my wife and kids and everything. Again, he says, "Listen, man, don't ever be embarrassed. I mean, you're a working guy, right? You're working for a living. You're not out stealing, right? You're not out robbing. You're not doing crap like that, right?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "So you always be," he goes, "Look, man." And he pulled up his pant legs and he showed me the scars on both knees. And he goes, "This is what I got for working 8, 9 years in the NFL." He said, "You see all the scars and everything?" And it looked like road maps. And he goes, "That's what I got." Well, guess what? That money stopped as soon as I retired. So he said, "You know what I had to do?" He said, "I had to hustle, man." He said eventually I was able to get, some spots on some of those TV shows where they had football games and I became an announcer. And he goes, "But you know what? A lot of times they get jealous and they want the next star coming out of the NFL to take my place." So he said, "I'm doing that. That's why I did Hamburger." He said it was a job because I have to make money, man. I have to, keep this out. I said, "Well, I'm just embarrassed because I just live in a middle class house, and you got this big beautiful house." And he goes, "That's just bullshit, man. It's just that doesn't mean anything." Anyway, so I appreciated that with Dick and everything, and kind of made me feel good. And actually, Bucket kind of said something similar to me too, because I went to pick up Sandy one time, and I had a badge on, and I forgot that I had it on. I'm knocking on the door, and he answers the door like that, and oh no, somebody else, the maid answers the door. And so they said, "Yeah, Johnny, come on in. Sandy's getting in the bathroom, getting ready like that." And I go, "That's okay. I'll wait out here," because I saw that I had the badge on. I thought, "Oh shit." And everything. And then he comes and opens the door and he goes, "Why the hell aren't you coming in the house?" And I go, "Well, buddy, I'm kind of embarrassed. I got my work shirt on and everything. I got to." And he goes, again, he did the same thing that Dick Buckus did. He goes, "Hey, listen, man, you work for a living. There's no big deal." Now, Sandy Hackett had told me his dad, Buddy Hackett, he said, "My dad works 2 weeks a year." And I go, really? And he says, yeah, he makes 2 million a week in Vegas, but that's all he works. And so I'm thinking, okay, this guy makes $4 million a year and he works 2 days of the year. So he can go on Johnny Carson and do it. And Johnny Carson's show had to pay, but they used to always joke, yeah, they're paying the minimum. And I think the when I first started watching the show, I think it was like $300 for the day to appear. And these guys are making millions and they're showing up there for $300. But now I realize it was all for PR purposes, really. It's like to keep their name out there so they can get more jobs. Rodney Dangerfield did that to a T, man. I mean, he figured it out. Ended up getting his own club and everything. And he had comics and he was good to other comics, which I
Yep.
I watched it kind of from afar. I wasn't real close to him and everything, but I watched it and somebody'd say, yeah, Rodney gave me a shot, man. I was like, wow, nice. In fact, when we were at the Comedy Store, that was serious stuff, man. Because if people saw you at the Comedy Store in prime times is usually from like 9 to about 11:30, right? Because people start going about midnight, they start going home, and everything. But at prime time, man, you could get big time executives from studios, from production companies, big stars would come in. I mean, you'd have major, major people. So that was the place to be and everything. And there was one kid, and I never got much prime time. I got a little bit, but not much, right? And a lot of times I was doing the belly room, which is a little small room in the back, or the big room, but I was doing comedy improv in the big room with the group that I was with. But people were always fighting to get the prime times in what was called the original room, which is up in front on Sunset Boulevard. You could see Sunset in the background. And so that was the goal. And Mitzi Shore, who owned it at the time, Sammy Shore was her husband. He was a famous vaudevillian comic, and he had died. And so she took it over. Pauly Shore was her son, if you remember Pauly Shore. He's done movies.
Yep.
Anyway, so Mitzi was the decider, right? And there was this one kid, and I knew him, and he had been there like about 3 or 4 years, and he could never get good time. And he was a really likable guy. His humor wasn't real big and broad. It was very subtle. So it took a certain kind of taste to get him and everything. So, but Mitzi would not give him any good times and everything. The Hyatt House was next door to us. The Hyatt House was like, I don't know, 13, 14 stories or something like that. Mitzi used to drive her car and park it right in the back. That was her parking spot. Everybody knew, don't you park in Mitzi's parking spot, man. You will get killed. They'll tow your car and then you'll get killed, by Mitzi. I mean, she was like the dragon lady, in a lot of ways. But everybody respected her. But this kid went up to the Hyatt House, went up on the top of the roof and dove off and tried to land on her car behind the thing. So he killed himself, committed suicide because he just felt like I'm here 3, 4 years. I'm not getting anywhere. And at the Comedy Store, pretty much you're working for free. So all the time that you're putting in is that's what club work was in LA. You did it for free. Why? Because there was so much talent there that club owners could get away from it. Not only did you have to work for free, but anybody that came to the shows, they usually, if it's in the original room, you had to pay like a fee to get in, and then you had a 2 drink minimum. And their drinks were not cheap, man. We're not talking about $3 drinks. We're talking about 12, $15 drinks, for shit that used to, should cost $3 and everything. So they're making a mint, man, and really taking advantage of these comics. And this poor kid, he just couldn't take it anymore, man. And so all of the comics were split. There was the Mitzi half, and then there was the dead comic half, and everything. And I kind of was in the middle of it, trying to figure it out and everything. I ended up writing a play about it, that whole experience, what it was like and everything. And I didn't end up selling it, but I got offered to have it published at Samuel French, which is a big bookstore on Sunset Boulevard. And my friend that actually was putting that contract together with me, he died. I was like, holy crap, man. And then somebody said, Johnny, welcome to showbiz. So that's been a running theme, for years and years and years. I use that whenever something doesn't go right. It's always like, well, welcome to showbiz, man. That's the way it goes. But what was I talking about? I know I went astray again. Uh, Hamburger? That was Hamburger, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Hamburger. Okay. Yeah. So trying to
And
think, there were some other stories that were,
well,
oh, well,
Dick had just passed away not too long ago as well.
I know. I
Yeah.
know. Yeah. Yeah. That's why I'm saying, man, they're going, it's like one after another. Well, now, Dick was probably 15 years older than me. So if he was probably 80, late 80s, probably, 80s, maybe even 90. But for an athlete to live that long, it's pretty good, especially a guy that's been beat up like he was, for all those years.
I
But
was
there are
looking up.
people that he told me this. He
Yeah.
told me Gale Sayers. Do you remember who Gale Sayers was, the running back? He told me that if Gale Sayers had not get injured, he would have broke every running back's record for forever in National Football League. He said he was that good, he was that talented. But it's injuries, just like Dick, got cut off at like 8, 9 years. That was it for you. That was his career. But he still made the Hall of Fame. I think Gale Sayers did too. But injuries cut a lot of guys short. I know a good friend of mine. Who played in the NFL also, he told me, man, they don't give a shit about you. Once you're through playing, he goes, you try to get your medical insurance through them, you try to get your pension, they just run up red flags and roadblocks every he goes, man, they're like one of the worst organizations ever. They just try to cheat the hell out of you. And if you're a guy that's played like 4 or 5 years and you don't make the whatever the minimum year amount, he goes, you're not getting anything from them. You're not getting health insurance, you're not getting a pension, you're not getting anything. It kind of turned me against. I know my boys all wanted to play football. I come from a very athletic family. My dad was a boxer, my uncle was a boxer. I played little professional baseball. And my boys ran track, they were on basketball teams and baseball teams. Sorry, I'm getting stuff on here. Let me get rid of this.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, but yeah, so I've seen a lot of kids that played on like travel teams with my kids, which are kind of like the all stars from every league. Puts together these travel teams, and you travel to different places and play. My boys all did that, so it was always kind of fun doing that and everything. But yeah, Dick Butkus was a good guy and everything, and that film, I mean, again, it was another terrible script, and everything, but somebody, put a few $1 million together and said, do it. I think it was a 2 million budget or something like. That's probably why they wouldn't pay Jonathan Winters 100,000, because that's a big chunk out of 2 million. That's
And
like
it's,
shit. Yeah,
I
it's.
think it's only on VHS. I was looking it up on here as you were talking, and yeah, it's,
Oh, really?
yeah, I don't understand that because you'd think they'd paid to sell that. So,
Well, the funny thing is there are fans because there was the guy that looked me up and tried it, and I think Tommy said there was somebody that he knew that was trying to find it too, and same thing. It's on YouTube, and
yeah.
now it's on. In fact, I looked at it. God, I looked at it within the last few weeks, and there's a whole bunch of people who viewed the film, and the guys that view the films, and then they're sitting there making commentary as the film is playing. There's a
Hmm.
whole bunch of those on here, and I thought, wow, you can't buy the movie anywhere. You can't see it anywhere, but it's on
Yeah,
YouTube.
I don't get that. I don't get that because I'm a physical media guy, so you had done quite a bit of television, but you had told me a story
Uh-huh.
about Pierce Bronson and your sister, and I was wondering if you relay that, before we close off.
Oh, sure. So Pierce Brosnan came on television. He had a new show in the early 80s. I think it was about 80, 81 or something, 82. I'm not sure. But anyway, he was the hot new male sex symbol on television, right?
Mhm.
Everybody was writing about it, everybody was talking about it. And he was a good looking guy and everything, and he was English. And so he got this show with see, there's another one. I did the FBI, which was done Efren Zimbalist Jr., which was Sunset. What was that called? That show. Anyway, his daughter was Stephanie Zimbalist, so she was the lead female on the show, and they got Pierce to be the male lead on the show.
Mhm.
And anyway, so he was the hot new thing, and I got this part, the show, and I was going to be shooting for 8 days, and 8 days they take a break for the weekend, and everything. So I was going to be there kind of like 2 weeks and everything. So my sister, one of my sisters finds. I got three sisters, and one of them found out that I'm going to be working on, Remington Steele with Pierce Brosnan, and so she says, Johnny, if you don't get me his autograph, I'm going to kill you. I said, "Oh yeah, sure you are, sis. Yeah, okay, whatever." So anyway, I go to the show, and when one of the assistant directors brings me in to introduce me to Pierce, he says, "Hey, Pierce, this is John Young. He's one of the guest stars this week on the show." oh, like that. And he says, "Oh, John, nice to meet you." And I said, "Pierce, listen, my sister said if I don't get your autograph, she's going to kill me." And he goes, "Well, that's against the law, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah, man, it is like that." He goes, "We'll have to do something about that." And I said, "Okay, well, thanks, bro." Anyway, so 8 days later, actually 10 days later, because of the weekends. Anyway, we sat down and had coffee a couple of times, and saw each other. Well, we had lunch one time together, and always at the craft service, and then I had scenes with him and everything on the set. Just small talk kind of stuff. Nicest guy in the world, man. Sweetheart of a human being, right? And so anyway, I never said another word about the picture, the autograph, or anything like that. So it's my last day, and it's about 2/3 of the way through the day. I knew that there was still some more filming going on, and so I think we were at CBS Radford in one of the big studios, one that's got like the size of a football field. And so, like, I'm at the far end and I got my little bag that I'm taking home with me, like that. And so I'm walking across the thing, going to go home and everything. And all of a sudden, I hear this, "John, John." And I turn around and it's Pierce Brosnan running across this sound stage. It's like a football field. He's running and he's waving this picture. And he gets up close to me and he goes, "Here, didn't want your sister to kill you." And we had never talked about this thing the whole time, man. And I'm like, "Holy crap, Pierce. Listen, man, you got a fan for the rest of your life, brother. I'm going to tell you, nobody does that kind of stuff." Oh my God, that's so beautiful, man. Thank you. God, my sister's going to be so happy. And he goes, "Yeah." Well, and he gave me a hug and, put his arm around me. He goes, "Hey, I hope we work together again, and everything like that." So as the years went by, again, like I did with Laura Dern and a few other people, um, I watched his career, and nice things happened. And I know I think he had a son that died, and then he had a wife that died also, and then he married another woman, and she had some health problems, and he stuck with her. And then I saw that he got some movies and was doing that. Then he got offered James Bond,
Hmm.
and again, I'm going, yeah, because whenever you see good people, that good things happen to them, man, especially around show business, you just go, "You know what, man, that really does my heart good," because good people can win in this world. And that's what I thought about, because again, welcome to show business. Well,
Hmm.
that was like welcome to Pierce Brosnan's business. So I was really happy to see that and anything. Anyway, so that's the Pierce Brosnan story. One more
That
drink.
was all, yeah. Wow. It was interesting because I know, we had talked a long time there when Tommy connected us, and it was really cool that number one, I appreciate him connecting us, and I appreciate you giving me a
Yeah.
call that day too, and we ended up talking quite extensively, and um, and I love just sitting back and letting the guest talk, like
You're really good at that, I could tell.
well, you know what? I don't mind interjecting and offering something, but if people are hearing more from me than the guest, there's a problem. I know there's sometimes I've listened back on interviews and I'm like, am I talking too much? You know? But I love it when the guest comes on here and they and they'll go on and they'll and one story will touch to another and then to another, and it just the narrative just goes, and that is you really had a story to tell, and I have fun, and I had these Blu-rays here and stuff, and even though I hadn't seen Roadhouse, I still, had questions about Terry Funk and whatnot because I definitely was familiar with him. But I'm really glad, and this Tommy caught on to this also, that you talk a lot about Roadhouse, and it is kind of nice, when you get to sit back and you're like, oh man, I get to talk about this, and I've had
Well,
those
there was a time I
conversations
hated
too.
talking. Yeah, I hated talking about Roadhouse, and I eventually I started realizing, hey, and I thought, I played a kind of a one-dimensional character, is the way I felt and everything. Especially after they cut my two big scenes out, that because I got to see. There was a scene where they actually revealed that one of the guys he ends up getting castrated in the movie, and I did the backstory for me, that he was my best friend. And so when we're castrating him like that, and literally I'm one of the guys carrying him down to the river to be castrated, right, on a stump. and everything, and we were doing the scene. And the backstory also was that I was the illegitimate son of Ben Gazzar's character, and so I'm torn between crying and being proud and laughing and everything. So I got all these emotions going on, and for whatever reason, it showed on screen. And I remember when we shot the master, and I did that, the whole cast just applauded and laughed right after they said cut. And I thought, oh my God, I'm so glad we got that in. And of course, it got cut. And the whole reason it got cut is because Joel Silver wanted to get by the censors, and he knew, well, you're cutting my castration scene out. You got to leave my tit scenes in, and my, my fighting scenes and all of that scenes. You got to leave those in because you're cutting out the castration scene. And if he evidently he had that plan from the beginning, and I didn't know, and I'm acting my heart out, and it seemed to work really, really good. And I was upset at first, and I thought, now I come off as a one-dimensional character, but whatever. Uh, it is what it is. But thank you, man, Greg, for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. I literally looked at the time just now, and I had a friend took her out for dinner last night. Actually, we went to a play, and then we went to dinner. And I told her, I said, yeah, I'm a little nervous talking this tomorrow because I'm old, man. And I forget a lot of crap. I probably won't have anything to say. And she looked at me, she goes, Johnny, I know you. You're going to have a lot to say. I said, yeah, you're telling me they can't shut me up? And she said, yeah, probably. So anyway, I thank you, man, so much. I'm glad you do this and everything.
Oh yeah. I was gonna ask, do you have any charities or a web page or anything like that that you want to plug on here that you want to
Well,
promote?
I used to plug the Cancer Society every year
Hmm.
because I've been fighting cancer for a few years, and I haven't done that in the last couple of years. I really don't do much social media
Okay,
anymore,
that's
but
okay.
yeah, but Cancer Society is really good because I've had people in my family that have cancer, and
Hmm.
my ex-wife, my kid's mom, she's fighting cancer, and she's had it come back, I think, after she thought it was gone. And so I'm a little sensitive in that area. But and then I've had the three brain surgery, so I was doing that for a while. I was trying to support them. In fact, I can't remember the name of their organization. That's part of one of my neurological issues is short-term memory loss. So that was one of the reasons I was afraid I wouldn't have anything to say when I came on
Oh,
here
you
either.
had
In
plenty.
fact, I'm sure. Okay, good. Well,
Yeah.
it's funny because immediately I'm going, oh, I forgot that funny story. I forgot that funny story. I got that funny story. But one of the things, and I told Tommy this, I'm trying so hard not to be negative because
Hmm.
it's so easy to show the negative side of show business,
Yep.
but to show the side where people can enjoy hearing about it. And it kind of, like you said, the inside story. And there were
Hmm.
a lot of inside stuff I didn't tell, but most of it that I told was, trying to stay positive. I hope it stayed that
You
way.
know what? I like that. I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I know I've got friends who have come to me and said, why don't you do a tell-all book? And I'm going, I'm not doing that, dude. Not doing that,
Well, you
man.
kind of did that with Terry Funk, but I mean,
Well, yeah, but
Terry Funk kind of started that tell-all too.
see, but that if you know Terry, when he would hear, he would have been going, "Damn right I did, damn it." I mean, that's Terry Funk. He would have relished it, man. I'm not kidding. That was Terry. He
Oh,
was just one of
Terry's
the
great.
greatest
Yeah,
human beings, man. Funnier than all get out, man.
I
But
bet.
midget wrestling, if you haven't seen midget wrestling, you got to go see midget wrestling.
I was familiar with some midget wrestlers like Sky Lolo, Lord Littlebrook, Little Beaver, guys like that.
Yeah,
Lord
Little Beaver.
Littlebrook, yeah, Lord
Yeah.
Littlebrook lived to be 87 years old, like,
Wow.
yeah. So he's outlived everybody so far in WrestleMania 3. So,
Wow. Small
yep.
world. Hey, come down to Mexico, man. We'll go to Nacho Libre.
Well,
See all
we
those
can do
guys in the
that.
mask.
Yeah,
Yeah, wouldn't
we
that be
could do.
cool?
There you
Yeah.
go. Maybe Jack Black will be there.
You
Jack
know, I
Black.
love his work, man.
Jack Black played in the movie
Uh,
Nacho Libre.
that's right. Yeah, that's right,
Yep.
man. Yeah. I
Yeah.
haven't seen that movie in a long time. I want to go back and see it again.
There you
Yeah.
go. Well, before I let
Well,
you
okay.
go,
I guess we're
would you
uh-huh.
mind doing a plug for my show?
You bet you, man. Where you what do I do?
Just state your name and say you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
Okay. Okay, I see it says Johnny Young. You want me to say my professional name?
Sure, go ahead.
Again, I'm John Young. My real name for Screen Actors Guild is John William Young, And so most people that follow my career, they know me as John William Young. But yeah, okay, just tell me when to go.
Go for it.
If it, go for it now. Hi, everybody. I'm John William Young. I'm one of the guests here on Greg's show, Greg Gilbert's show, which is Python's Paradise. Did I get it right, Greg? And this is a great, great show, and you get to see a lot of inside things that happen in movies. And I know Greg really specializes in comedies and horror films, sci-fi films, things like that. Yeah, and he's really a good guy, man, and he'll let you talk forever. So any of my famous friends out there, get a hold of Greg, man, and share some stories with him. And it's like being with an old friend, man, just sitting around the fireplace and having a brew or something. Anyway, and I thank you so much, Greg, for letting me come on here and be your guest, man. Been a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, the pleasure was all mine, and I'm really glad that Tommy had recommended you, and I had
Oh,
reached out, and I hadn't heard anything, but I don't know. I think Tommy had reached out to you because I mentioned to Tommy that I'd reached out. He asked he'd throw some names at me, and we go back and forth on that, and so
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so he
It's funny.
he.
Tommy has had a lot of people that I know as friends that I've worked with over the years, and people who were personal friends. So I didn't even know they were on the show. In fact, when I went back to LA earlier this year, like in I think February, one of the guys that was on the show, Megan King, who was an actor, and his dad was an actor too. In fact, his dad had a pretty prolific career at one time in the 50s and 60s. But anyway, he and I just sitting down and just having coffee or dinner together. I think we had in Burbank, and and what have you been doing lately? Blah blah blah. And I mentioned Tommy's show or something like that, and he goes, "Oh shit, I did that show too." And I go, "Really?" So I went on and I listened to his show and everything like that, which is nice because you can go back and see all of the episodes. Can you do that with yours too?
Oh
Is
yeah,
there?
they're on YouTube and Spotify.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Well, YouTube, I do. I don't know. I don't even know how to do Spotify. So, in
Well,
fact, I was
the only thing I don't have on Spotify is the 30 episodes I did in 2020, and I think there was three in 2019 because my brother was putting them up on YouTube. But the ones I had done when I was at the station before lockdown, but those ones never get up. But they are up on Spotify. So all my stuff's on up on Anchor, Spotify,
So
but
how do you
you
find it? You have to put in the name Johnny Young, I guess, or John William Young. Which one? Probably Johnny Young,
it's
because
gonna be
that's.
John William Young. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
All right. So, and you go there and you have the little what do you call it? Microscope, not microscope. What is it? Magnifying glass, right? That you do that, you push that, and then you put the name down, and it'll go to it.
yeah. I would hope
Okay.
so. Yeah,
Okay. Well,
but
I probably want my kids to kind of look at it.
yep, and it'll be on YouTube as well. So um,
Okay.
yep. So I'll have it premiere on YouTube in the next short while here, and yeah, you'll get
Okay.
tagged on it on Facebook. So there you go.
Beautiful.
Oh,
Greg, thank you, man, again so much. You're a really interesting guy and everything. I love what you're doing. And, I love the fact that you don't just take stars, because a lot of places only just do stars, and everything. So there's a whole working actor group that people don't even know about. And, I
you
think
want me to
I
tell you
looked
a
at myself as
story?
a blue collar guy. What's that?
I'll tell you a little story.
Okay.
I had an Australian filmmaker reach out to me, and his name was David Black. I had never heard of him, never seen a single film he'd done, but he wanted to promote his film. And he was having a hard time getting on the podcast because he was an unknown. And I
Right.
look at myself, I'm an unknown. Like, I'm not Joe Rogan. But so
Right.
I said to him, I said, when are you available? That was all I asked. I said, what dates and times? I got his time zone. He was in Australia, so I worked that all out. And we scheduled time. And I remember him saying to me, he says, we might not get any more than half hour out of me because, I didn't know who he was. We ended up talking for 3 hours, I believe. And it surprised
Holy
him.
cow.
My secret is I just ask questions. I asked him about his
Yeah,
background
yeah.
and getting into the business, and then I'd look at these titles and I'd just ask about them. And he was surprised it went as long as it did. And I said, it's not that whether I know you or not. It's a matter of to be a good interviewer, you've got to, even if you don't know the person, ask questions. You can learn something yourself as well
Right, right.
as allow the listeners to learn something. And I don't generally I don't turn people down. And yeah, I like to open that up where people can come on. So to me, people say unknowns, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm really an unknown. Going to these conventions, I've been recognized 3 times, and that's fine. It's great when I am,
Wow, man.
but but it's not necessary, but I think it's just the way I was brought up, It's like um, feel blessed that you have the opportunity. Like to me, I don't look at you as an unknown. I look at you, I look at the body of work you've done, and I'm like, oh man, there's so much to talk about here, Like so it's like anytime I
Would have
watch
thunk
these
it, man.
movies, yeah, like anytime I watch these movies and you come on screen, it's like I talked to that guy, and this not listen, whenever you called me that day and it was just when my brother was dropping me off because he was borrowing my car. He's dropped me off in my apartment. And
Uh-huh.
the moment I mentioned the having the Melon Patch Kid, my younger brother looked at me and he knew immediately who I was talking to.
Wow. See,
Yeah.
that blows me away, man, because I think it's like a blip, in the radar screen.
Yep,
That's
but I
funny.
mean, look at you get that big doll there, you get the glasses, you just all pleasant and whatnot. You're just happy to sell this thing to Rodney and
You know
my
what?
my brother
I'm
knew
I'm gonna.
exactly what I was
Oh, he
talking
did. Well,
about.
for fun, I have a picture of that somewhere. I'll have to find it in my thing, but I'm gonna put that picture on my Facebook thing. I'll leave it on for a week or something like that because that's kind of cool with the melon patch doll. I
Hmm.
just put that up on there to identify me. It's kind of fun. Yeah, that'd be kind of
Yeah,
yeah, that's good, man. I like that. Yeah. Well, again, Greg, thank you, man, so much. And say hello to Tommy for me. Hey, Tommy.
I
I don't
will.
know if he
Yep.
watches this or not, but yeah.
He
But
probably
and
will.
thank him, for the connection.
Yeah, he's 4 hours behind me. I know that. I'm in New Brunswick, so I'm an hour ahead of New York time. So there you go. Um,
Is he in
um,
LA? Is that where he's in LA?
um,
West Coast?
he's in the Pacific Coast time, so yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but
Okay.
anyway, yeah, it was wonderful having you on, and well, I wish you a happy American Thanksgiving.
Thank you,
We have
man.
ours a month ago, so I don't get that, but
Well, where I live in Mexico, believe it or not, we have a lot of expats, and I'd say a good 40% of them are Canadian. They're snowbirds. They come down when you get snow, they're coming down here because we,
there
we
you
have
go.
beautiful spring weather all year round. So
There you go. Well,
yeah, but a lot
God
of
bless.
Canadians. So
Yeah. Well, God
thank you,
bless
man.
you.
You too, Greg. It was nice talking to you and everything.
And
If
you
I
never
if I
know.
think of anybody else I think that might be a good lead for you, I'll give you a holler or a shout and let you know, man. Never
Oh,
can tell.
I'd appreciate it. I'd appreciate it.
In fact, two of my boys are in the directors guild. They primarily work as assistant directors, but both of them work in first assistant directors. But they've worked with major people. So maybe at some point, maybe that might be. I don't know if you've ever talked to
You know,
assistant directors before.
actually,
Um,
I'll talk to anybody.
oh, okay, okay.
Send me their info. I'll look them up and send me their info.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
again, I know that I try to be discreet. I think they even try to be more discreet, because they're literally in these guys, dressing rooms, trying to get them ready to go out and film.
I'm not looking for dirt, so that's
That's cool,
fine with
man. I love
me.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, like if somebody wants to tell me something, that's fine, you know,
Yeah,
but
right.
I don't go looking for it. So there you go.
Well,
So
thank you
give
for letting me cuss.
oh, that's no problem. No problem, you know. Yeah,
Yeah, I appreciate that.
send me your sons your two boys info and yeah, I'll reach out. Absolutely.
Let me do this. Let me run it by them first because yeah, I I don't want to ambush them with something, without them, but
That's fine.
again, they've worked with a lot of the big boys and
Hmm.
everything, and yeah. So if you can get it out of them, a lot of times I'll ask them questions and everything, and they don't tell me. I think it's because of that Facebook incident, where I put the picture up of my son, when he signed the do not disclose contract, and I had no idea. So that might be why they don't tell me a lot of stuff. But a lot of times it's like pulling teeth to get information from them. Where I'm, speak free. I just my life is an open book. It's like whatever. But yeah, okay, let me do that then, and I'll get back to you, as soon as I get permission. Does that sound okay with you?
Sounds great. Sounds
Okay,
great.
and if I hear anybody else that I think might be a good fit for you, and I know what your format is now, I looked at a few of your things before I came on and everything, and I thought, hey, very cool. This is nice and everything. So, the thing about it is when you're working this industry, you just don't work with actors. You work with craft people. In fact, one guy trained me. He was a sound guy, and like 3 or 4 projects in a row, television, movie, commercial. We were working on it together like that. And he comes up to me after the third one, and he goes, "So where are we working next week?" And I knew he meant that, And it's you just get to know people, So you never can tell. It might be someone that might be. In fact, there's a guy that you would probably love. His name's Joe Castro. He does special effects.
I've had Joe Castro on here, I think three
Get out of
times.
get out of here! Really?
Oh yeah, Joe's been
Okay.
on here. Yep,
He does
Terror
magnificent
Tunes.
work. Oh my God. He does all that stuff you would love. And he's been acting in some of these films too. So, it's like, what do you mean you're an actor? Joe, what are you doing? I thought you were doing all this special effects makeup kind of stuff. And some of his stuff is incredible. I've turned other people on to him that
Yeah.
I knew in the business, just to say,
Well,
hey
yep.
man, if you need a guy, look at this guy's work. I mean, he
I've
had one
had.
where he had a guy pull an axe out of the guy's head.
Mhm.
Oh my God. I mean, it kind of freaked me out when I first saw it. I thought that looks too real. But anyway, Joe, good guy, good
He
guy and
is.
everything. And I thought he would be good, but there you go. See? Yeah.
There you
And you
go.
three times already you've had him. That's incredible, man.
I believe it's three. I believe it's three times
Yeah.
I've had him on. Because I cameo in a James Balsamo movie called It Wants
Okay.
Blood, and I think he did the monster effects in that. So there you go.
That sounds like something Joe would do. Yeah. He's
Yeah.
great at it, man. Anyway, again, thanks so much, Greg. If I don't get to the bathroom quick, I'm going to lose it here. So,
Well,
anyway, it's good talking to you. Okay.
God bless you. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too, man. Happy have a nice Christmas and everything too.
Absolutely. Take care, man.
You too, buddy. Bye.
Bye bye.